Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what cross him.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Friday, November 1st, 2024. Hope you guys survived Halloween. The witches and ghouls didn't get you. So I'm going to finish up this Wisdom of Solomon series with Ecclesiastes here. We're going to go through the whole book right now. If you guys are inclined to pray for me, I'm flying out to India in 2 weeks, and I just caught a sinus infection when I was in Michigan, or some kind of cold or something. Started hitting me pretty hard today in terms of congestion, and I'm hoping it will be gone in 2 weeks. So anyways, we're going to talk about this book, and if you remember the last two I did, I kind of put Song of Solomon before this. Ecclesiastes, it follows in your Bible, it's going to follow Proverbs, and I think because it's kind of a summary of wisdom, but I feel that Song of Solomon should probably come before it, because if you understand the trajectory of the teaching in Proverbs, it seems to be about finding that godly wife, which is the type of the church, and then of course you have the Song of Solomon, which is all about the love and the romance between the bride and the groom, which is very typological of the church. And then Ecclesiastes is more like it's more like Solomon's repentance, and he basically, you can tell it's towards the end of his life. He doesn't really get into his specific sins except for just talking about folly in general. But at the end of this, he's going to get into all of his basically great accomplishments. Remember, he was king for 40 years before he died. But he was pretty young when he was born, which means he died pretty young. If he's king for 40 years, I think he's king for 40 years, he probably started being a king when he was possibly a teenager, if not very early 20s, which means he would have died around 60. So despite everything that he had, not having fought in wars, his dad outlives him, who fought in wars since he was a teenager. He's drinking, he's partying, he's sleeping around, he's doing whatever he wants, and he's dead by like 60. Despite being, the richest guy in the world, and he has everything at his fingertips. And what he's talking about is this is kind of a natural course of people who pursue wisdom and who pursue folly. And he's going after the extremes of both things, trying to accomplish too much in terms of your legacy, trying to work too hard to be too righteous, trying to enjoy everything and finding yourself in folly. And he basically is going to sum it all up to say, what's good is to just understand what God's placed you on this earth to do, find what you're good at in terms of work and just do it and try to do it a good job, and appreciate your wife, appreciate your kids, appreciate your food, appreciate your life, and just live simply. Which, for the majority of people in the majority of history, that is what they're called to. There are people who are called to great things. There are people who are called to wars and to be kings and to, be prophets and to be super knowledgeable and wise and to confront things and all this. But for the majority of us, we're supposed to seek peace and just, farm the land and live under our own vine and our own fig tree. Like, seek to just have a wife, have a family, seek to really just appreciate what God has given us and have peace, and learn to live through the cycles of life without anxiety and worry and comparing ourselves to others. And so he's going to go through his kind of systematic way of how he learned all this, which is kind of a lot of the wisdom that's in the Proverbs. But he's now kind of looking at the end of his life and just summing it all up. So if you were to take all these Proverbs, which are kind of wise, practical sayings for different circumstances, obviously the book as a whole has a theme, but a lot of it, I skipped 20 chapters of it, which is just do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Those who do this, this tends to happen. Those who do this, this tends to happen. He's going to just sum it all up to say, this is what I've learned. Remember, God graced him with wisdom by the Holy Spirit beyond any man who ever lived. The only person who would have been wiser than him is Jesus. So So we want to we want to take very seriously what he has to say, and then you want to understand that he really is the prince and the fountainhead of the philosophical tradition. People are going to make it sound like it's all these guys in the 7th century BC, but the reality is all these guys popped up after the temple was destroyed. And that suggests that his wisdom was probably known worldwide and probably unparalleled. And then after the temple was destroyed and obviously quickly forgotten, you have all these other new philosophers come up in the world to try to be the next Solomon. That's how I see it, and that's how I'm going to frame it in my Serpent by the Way book. So anyways, I'm going to be reading this mostly out of the NRSV. King James Version is okay. I just want to just have a smooth read rather than all the S's and the I's and stuff like that. So I might defer back to it when I need to get into the interlinear, but I don't think the NRSV does a bad job in this book. So it says, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And when he's saying vanity, you want to think of vanity in two senses. One is just, when we say, you're so vain, I bet you think this song is about you. It's like you're trying to do things for your own glory, and that's pointless. If you live for God's glory, you are ultimately going to have a better reputation at the end of your life. If you live for your own glory, you're going to have a worse reputation at the end of life, because people who live for their own glory just end up showing their wickedness. I mean, we all have sin in us, and when we try to show off how righteous we are or how great we are, what ends up being prominent is what a tool we are, essentially, because we're not supposed to be pursuing our own greatness. We're supposed to be pursuing God's greatness. And in that, then we look better and we do good things and we are noticed by others instead of trying to praise ourselves. So that's one side of vanity. The other one is vanity is just kind of saying like emptiness or worthless or pointless or without reason. Okay, and so he's kind of saying both in one, and he's saying everything sucks. Everything is without reason. And he's not saying everything is pointless. What he's saying is listen what he says here. What do people gain from all the toil which they toil under the sun? In other words, are striving. Okay? So when you think about, he says, what profit does a man have from all his labor that he takes under the sun? In other words, there's never a point of peak accomplishment. And he's going to get into all of this. So all of this is driving towards seeking contentment as your pursuit. And so he's going to get into a lot of the things that people pursue with their efforts and saying that's all pointless. He's not just saying the world is pointless, life is pointless. Otherwise, that would be kind of denigrating God and his plan. So this is a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the winds return. All the streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. Now, he's not saying that history is cyclical or that things just keep repeating themselves in general. He's saying that the pursuits of men keep going round and round and round, and it never really gets better. Okay? So we can look at this and go, look at all our technology and all the crazy stuff we have. Great. People still die an age of 70 to 80 worldwide. It's been the same since the day of Moses. With all our advances in medical technology, we haven't figured out how to make people more healthy than they were in Solomon's day. 3,000 years later. Okay? With all our advances in manufacturing and food, we really haven't figured out how to have a better life. Yeah, we got better looking clothes, but we're fatter. So how is that better? We don't look better. Our clothes look better. Botox is not really an advancement in beauty. Okay. we're not really healthier than people who spent more time walking and running. We're not really getting more accomplished. Yeah, there's more people, but there would have been more people either way. Because let's face it, all we really had to multiply was food, clothing, and shelter. That's it. And all of our other advancements just kind of have their pluses and minuses. They're better over here and they're worse over here. They're better over here and they're worse over here. We're not any better. Okay? So what he's saying is we're going to keep going round and round. Empires are going to keep rising and fall. Kingdoms and cities and human lives and human achievements are going to keep rising and fall. Nothing's really changed. He says, is there a thing of what it says, see, this is new. It has already been in the ages before us. Okay? So don't think in terms of specific technologies. Think in terms of ideologies, accomplishments, endeavors. Same thing. Yeah, I know. Alexander the Great tried to store all the world's knowledge at Alexandria. How did that work out? Fell apart and turned into a bunch of people buggering lads. How's it working out for us with the internet? It's falling apart and turning into a bunch of people buggering lads. Like, we can't really figure out how to do anything with great amounts of knowledge, but, overthrowing governments and buggering lads, apparently. Like, that's just what it ends up being because human beings suck. So, he says, the people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of the people yet to come by those who come after him. I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. So, remember also, you want to understand in Solomon's tone, by the end of his life, he has largely turned away from God. Okay? So the Bible never really says, and then Solomon says, woe is me, I did all these stupid things. I should repent of all the mistakes I made, multiplying wives and gods and stuff. He never really does that. What Solomon seems to be doing, again, it says his wives turned him towards other gods, is he seems to be exploring all the world's religions and all the world's histories as much as he can and trying to understand everything, which is kind of similar to what I'm doing. The difference is he's not born again. He doesn't have an anchor in Jesus. He has wisdom from the Holy Spirit, but he's not a born again man, and so there's no gospel here. He doesn't know the gospel is coming. He really doesn't understand. Those are promises to David about the son of David, which he and David thought were being fulfilled in him. Okay? So even though David and Solomon are prophets, it doesn't mean they know everything. And so they're going to be prophesying things in songs and proverbs and in here that and in the Psalms as well, but that point to Christ, but they don't really know what they're saying. That's what Peter's going to say about the Old Testament prophets. They don't really know what they're saying. And so in the natural, this guy's just like trying to put together all the philosophies and all the religions in the world, okay? And he said, I applied my mind to search out wisdom and all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given human beings to be busy with. In other words, he doesn't really get the point of life. He doesn't really get the point of history. He's going to say things based on what he knows. And it's not that this is not a Holy Spirit-inspired book. It definitely is. But the Holy Spirit is working through Solomon in the ups and downs of his own life, which includes sin, to kind of draw him to the natural conclusion of what wisdom is. So he looks at life and he's just like, man, we're all trying so hard for what? This is the point that he's getting to. And at the end of the book, it's going to make sense. His conclusion's going to make sense. But he really is being a real human here and saying, man, I've done it all, and this is pointless. This sucks, okay? I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vanity and chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. In other words, there's something wrong here. I can't make myself better. I can't make other people better. I can't make. Remember how much money he has. Remember how rich Israel is during his days. Silver is counted as stones. That's how much gold is flowing through his kingdom. Nobody uses silver for money anymore. It's just there. He uses silver to trade for foreign chariots and horses because it's good to the Egyptians. But in Israel, everyone's just using gold for currency. That's how rich they are. And yet they're not more righteous. He's not more righteous. They're not really better people. And by the end of his kingdom, he's getting into conflicts with his neighbors again. He says, I said to myself, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were ever in Jerusalem before me, or over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. I've applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that all this is but a chasing after the wind, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. This is true. The more you learn about history, about philosophy, about religion, about psychology, about sociology, politics, you name it, the more you get to this place of just like, this is pointless. Because the reason why so many politicians are corrupt is because if you really were to go to Washington and say, I am going to try to fix this thing, I'm going to try to work for the greater good, you're going to quickly figure out, like, this is impossible. Why? We have 300 million free people who all want different things. They have different geographies, different resources, different backgrounds, different cultures, different socioeconomic statuses by nature. And no matter what you do, some over here are going to be happy and some over here are not. Just what it is. And so what people do, and this is what ends up happening with the congressmen and the senators, is they figure out how to make money for themselves through playing the game with legislation. And, we're going to move the legislation over here. So that means those companies are going to grow and they're going to get these contracts. And therefore, I'm going to invest in those countries and companies and enrich myself. Or this tax law is going to change. And so I'm going to move my money from these investments to those investments. Or flat out bribes. Here's some campaign contributions that sometimes end up in their pockets, and it's just about making money while giving the appearance of fighting for your constituency and what they want and need. Okay, but really, what you're fighting for your constituency for is just what it takes to keep getting you reelected, so you can keep using basically this high-level lawyer position to make more money for yourself. And that's what most of them do. They're not really about anything good. And then there's the party interests, and so you got to balance what your constituency wants with what the party wants, and and also the corporate lobbyist interests who are going to figure out ways to make you rich if you make things go their way. Okay? If you're really trying, you realize this is a bullcrap equation. Democracy was never meant to be successful. Otherwise, God would have ordained it. We were never meant to live under democracy. There is no democracy in the Bible. God doesn't exemplify it. He doesn't show you it. He does show you a republic, but that republic is based on people worshiping God and based on people fearing God and actual judgments that come down from God supernaturally. And so we can't really compare that to anything that we're trying to do. Okay? But the point is you get to this point with your knowledge, and again, it could be psychology, it could be politics, it could be law, it could be religion, it could be all this different stuff, and you get to this point where you're just like, I'm kind of depressed. I'm kind of down. I don't smile a lot. Once you get to a point of knowledge where you really see what's going on, what you really see is human beings suck, and I can't wait for Jesus to get back. But of course, you can't force Jesus to get back, and you can't really be like, well, Jesus, why can't you come back right now? Because it sucks so bad here. Because there are those verses in Amos that say, woe to them who say, I can't wait for the day of the Lord, because The day of the Lord is a day of destruction, and how do you know it's going to be good for you? Okay. The point is even though I want Jesus to be back, I can't be so selfish about that I am willing to forego all the people who are not yet saved so Jesus can come back and make my life more satisfying. Okay. I need to tough it out, and I need to be here to preach the gospel to people until the time that God has appointed for Jesus to come back, which means I'm stuck with my knowledge, and I try to smile by making jokes. But the reality of this world is when you really know what's going on, when you've really seen the dark underbelly of this world, there ain't no good in it. And there ain't no good in most of the Christians that you know, except for the Holy Spirit, and hopefully they're taking their walk seriously and the fear of God's getting them in the butt. But for a lot of them, it's just like they're lukewarm. And, the politicians suck. There's no point in this. The business world sucks. There's no point in that. So what do you do? What do you do when you're miserable because you know too much? Okay? Because you can't really fix it. I don't care who you are. You're not fixing this thing. So he says to himself, I said to myself, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. I'll enjoy myself. Well, at least I've got wisdom so I can figure out how to make some money. And then when I make some money, I'm going to travel. I'm going to find a nice, good-looking lady. I'm going to do the stuff that I wanted to do. And I'm just going to do me. Okay? So this is what Solomon's doing. And I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? It eventually gets old. The ladies are gold diggers. They just want your money. The travel is just a bunch of people trying to take your money, scamming you into stuff that's not really that fun. What's fun is a hike because you're getting some exercise and eating some food. And yes, the right lady is great, but the wrong lady is miserable. Solomon has figured this out 1,000 times, okay? I searched with my mind how to cheer my body with wine. My mind still guiding me with all wisdom. In other words, I had my faculties about me, but I'm getting drunk. Tried the drugs. I tried the peyote. I tried the ayahuasca. I tried the weeds, the buds, and I tried the icky sticky, and I'm still miserable. I'm just like, it dulls my senses for a while, but I'm not happy now. And how to lay hold of folly until I might see what is good for mortals to do under heaven in the few days of their life. In other words, I'm going to try partying so I can tell people, hey, the goal is to just have a good time, to see how I can help other people get through the misery of their life. Smoke some weed once in a while, have a good glass of wine and get a good buzz. This will make you feel better. Nope. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. Maybe if I get my dream house and I get everything right and people want to come hang out at my house, and then I can have my privacy when I want it, and I can have the peace and relaxation to read my books. Nope, no happiness there. I gave myself gardens and parks, and I planted them all kinds of trees. I made myself pools from which the water of the forest I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. So he's planting forests for himself. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves that were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and wisdom, and the delights of the flesh, and many concubines, a.k.a. I had stacks of ladies. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. All my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. And this is what it's like. This is when you work hard, you accomplish things, and you know what? Then you put it down and you're not happy at the end of the day. So I need to reward myself. Well, what am I going to reward myself? Well, apparently drugs, alcohol, and ladies. It never really changes, you guys. It's drugs, alcohol, and ladies. Rock stars, movie stars, rich tycoons, CEOs at the top of their game, lawyers who just won the big case, politicians, booze and ladies. Booze and ladies. That's my reward for what I've done because I don't feel satisfied. Then I consider all that my hands had done and the toil that I spent doing it. And again, all was vanity and chasing after the wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. I never get to this place of peace. I never get to this place of satisfaction. So I turn to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can one do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. In other words, if I achieve all this stuff, what's my son going to do? Just the same thing I'm going to do. He's going to build more stuff. And at the end of the day, it's going to be booze and ladies. Booze and ladies. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. So, okay, I've tried all the booze and ladies. It's better to be wise than to be foolish, I've decided. The wise have their eyes in their heads, but the fools walk in darkness. Yet I perceive that the same fate befalls all of them. So it's better to be wise, but it's not like the solution. Then I said to myself, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so wise? And I said to myself that this also is vanity. For there is no enduring remembrance of the wise or the fools, seeing that in all the days to come, all will have been forgotten. Really? Let me put it this way. I have a great-grandpa, who started the first town store in a new city. Okay? He was a pivotal member of a community. I have another great-grandpa who was possibly a philanderer and who seemed to have been maybe a draft dodger who fled from Scotland to Canada, maybe, to avoid being drafted in a war. Maybe. I don't know either of their names. I learned all this on Ancestry.com. I don't remember either of their names. Why? Because you forget. And that's just like a little over 100 years ago. Nobody's great. I mean, how many people in history do you remember? You can't name 50 famous people from all of world history that are dead. You can't name them. Because you'll probably name Hitler. You'll all name Hitler, and he's the worst. You'll name Alexander the Great, and he was the worst. And those are the people who you're going to name, are these conquerors who do very awful things. Then you're going to be like Nietzsche. No, he was awful. Kant, no, he was very dull and awful. They're not great. There's very few great men, and the men that we remember as great is because their stories were whitewashed because they won the victory. Okay? The point is, there's the great wise men were, one, not so great, and two, even if they were, we don't remember them. Sun Tzu was pretty wise. Was he, though? Maybe. Who really knew Sun Tzu? I don't know. I know a book he wrote. I know his name's on a book. Okay. You don't remember. What did he accomplish? I don't know. He wrote a book. He wrote a book that I had to read in my philosophy class. Okay. So that's all you know. Well, I wrote 3 books, so screw Sun Tzu. See? It doesn't really make sense to say, oh, these great men. And that's how it's going to be no matter how much you accomplish. 100 years later, who are you? Nobody. So I hated life because what was done in the sun was grievous for me, and all this is vanity and chasing after the wind. I hated life, okay? So he's talking through how he really felt. I hated life. I hated all my toil, which I told in the sun, seeing that I must leave it to those who come after me. And who knows whether they will be wise or foolish, yet they will be master of all of which I told for, and use my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. And of course, we see the history which comes after it. Immediately, his son gets his kingdom cut in 2. This is what he does. He makes Israel the richest he's ever known. They are probably, along with Egypt, probably the 2 most powerful kingdoms on the earth at this time. People might say, oh, what about China? Well, China was pretty big, but they're also pretty isolated. Okay, the only people they had to deal with was the Mongols, and they didn't start reigning in the Mongols and getting those walls built for about another 800 years. So it's not China. Okay, what about Mesoamerica? I don't know. They've had civilizations rise and fall. Who knows? What about Babylon? Nope. Nobody was super powerful in Babylon at this time. Okay, Babylon and Sumeria are a bunch of warring city-states that are being contended over by Arameans in Mesopotamia, Assyrians in next door to Mesopotamia, Elamites next door to Sumer, and occasional raids from Medes. There's not really a great Babylonian kingdom at this time. Assyria is just kind of starting to grow. They're not really big at this time. The Hittites are falling apart. The Greeks are just kind of starting to come up. The only really great kingdoms in the world right now are Israel and Egypt. And they're allies. And they're doing great. Okay? And yet, Solomon's son is going to botch it and cut Israel in half and then get raided by the Egyptians, and it's just a major downgrade. Basically take all of Solomon's accomplishments and cut it in half. And Solomon's like, this sucks. He knows. He's like, I've checked out my kids. I'm the wisest man who ever lived. My kids are not so bright. So I turned and gave up my heart to despair, concerning all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes one who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave it all to be enjoyed by another who did not toil for it. This is vanity and a great evil. This sucks too. Why should my son get all the stuff that I labored for? What do mortals get from all the toil and strain which they labor under the sun? If some of you are reading this and be like, Solomon seems somewhat narcissistic. He is. He's very narcissistic. I mean, you don't get 1,000 wives by being a selfless person. He probably honestly has thousands of kids. Thousands of kids, thousands of wives vying for his attention. Okay? Donald Trump has 5 kids vying. No, what? 4 kids? 5 kids vying for his attention from 3 wives. Multiply that by 350, and that's Solomon. He don't care about anybody but himself. He doesn't really have a relationship with anybody but himself. Okay? I don't think the Shulamite's a real woman. I think it's a hypothetical woman. I think it's a prophecy, and I don't think Solomon really has a relationship like that going on with anybody. Okay? He's miserable. I don't care who you are. You start to stack up 100 women right there, it's literally like, okay, who do I want to sleep with now? Oh, now I got to listen to him. This sucks. It sucks for them, and it sucks for you. Because you know on your best day, he's got 100 other women. You are not going to get Thursdays. You are not going to get Julys on Thursday. You are not going to get the second Thursday of every 3rd month. Okay? Nope. You can only be so good at sex. You can only be so good at cooking. Okay? You are not going to get real affection from this guy. And that's if he has 100 wives. He's got 1,000. He's got 300 or 700 wives and 300 concubines or something like that. You are just like a passing fancy for this guy. He's driving around in a sports car and he's like, hey, she looks good for a minute. I'm going to go in the phone booth and sleep with her and then drive on. That's what Solomon's life is like. And yet, he's going to take care of all these women. They have needs. Their kids have needs. And he's just like, yeah, those are all my kids over there. What do you do with 1,000 people? What do you do with 100 people? What do you do with 50 people? Most of us, if you can have 5 kids and pay attention to them and actually know them, you are a champ. Because, I mean, you've got work to think about, you've got your wife to think about, you've got church to think about, you've got God to think about, and now 5 more people. You don't have time for friends. Most of my friends who have a few children who are good fathers and good husbands, they have 5 or less friends. And honestly, most people hang out with their family. Okay? You just don't have time for that many people. I go travel to Michigan where I grew up most of my life, and I'm gonna be there for a week, and I'm gonna see 5 to 10 people. 5 to 10 people, and they're all gonna make time for me because they're only gonna see me once a year. But the reality is if I lived there full time, I'd still see those 5 to 10 people. Maybe some of them I would see 5 times a year. Maybe some of them I would see 1 or 2. Because the reality is they've got families, they've got kids, they've got churches, they've got God, they've got their wives, they've got their in-laws, they've got way too much to focus on. You can't contemplate 1,000 wives. Having 1,000 wives is just like, pure rock star status. Look at my stack. Look how big my stack is. Those are people. Yeah, they don't matter. So yeah, Solomon's a narcissist, okay? That's why he's so miserable. He says, what do mortals get from all the toil and strain where they strain on their son? Well, I don't know, but I'll bet if you had one wife to hang out with that cared about you and you cared about her, it'd be a lot better than having 1,000. For all their days are full of pain, and their work is vexation. Even at night their minds do not rest. This also is vanity. He's always on his next accomplishment. And I know people are like this. I know people who are like, I know them in their 20s, and they're never satisfied. Never. And they have it all. They have a good paying job, they have a pretty wife, they have kids, they have a house, and they're going on vacation on the regs, and they're always reaching for more. Why? Why aren't you not satisfied? This is vexation. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This is also vanity. They're always looking for their next accomplishment, and they don't even know why. That's the problem. You don't even know why. There's nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink, to find their enjoyment in their toil. See, this is it. There's nothing better for mortals, for men, for people who are going to die, to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. Find some work that you enjoy doing. I enjoy doing this work. I enjoyed doing recruiting for a time, but I really enjoyed the connections and the learning. And once I got to a place where it's like, you're just a transaction to these people, you're just a means to an end to these people, none of these people really care about you. I probably have less than 5 people in the thousands of people I talk to in recruiting that I actually formed some kind of relationship with. Not one is a friend. There are people that I consider, a work associate, an acquaintance, but we have some respect for each other and we like each other. And when we talk, we actually have a conversation, and it's not just about business. But the majority, if I were to pick up the phone and call them, they'd be like, so you don't have a job prospect for me? Why are you calling me? Okay? And I consider myself a good guy, but, that's business. It's transactional. You're not there to make friends. And then there are people that I've done really solid for that appreciate me for that reason, but we never really formed a relationship. And then there are people that we've actually had some real conversations about real life, and some people that I've met that are believers, and some people that are just solid dudes, and we've actually formed a little bit of a connection. So I might pick them up and talk to them, and we might talk about the Lord and talk about life. I've had some really good conversations like that. I've had people who come back to me and say, you changed my life, and let me tell you. And I've had people come to me and give me what I needed in a way that God sent them into my life. But they're a phone call and not a face, and they're 1,000 miles away, and that's that. That's that. And maybe some of these people I'll know in heaven, but most of them I won't. You're not going to get your satisfaction from these people. So you want to find something that you do that you enjoy. This is a goal. It's not the achievement that you enjoy. In other words, I made really good money recruiting, but would I want to pick it up and just do it for free? This is what you want to do with your pursuits in life, whether it's job or anything. Get to a point where you're doing something that if you could do it for free and pay your bills, you would. I like this. I like writing. I like explaining the Bible to people. I like working on cars. There are people who just like working on cars. I am not one of those people. I don't like bruising my knuckles and figuring out every wrong way to fix a car part before I figure out the right way. But that's because I suck at it. There are people who like it. There are people who are under the hood of a car and they're just like, this is cool, and they're learning this, and this sucks, but this can be better, and they would do it for free. You need to find your version of that. And maybe your version of that is just going to work so you can have a job that minimalizes how much mental energy you use, so you really can be there for your kids and their sports and blah, blah, blah. And that's okay too. But the point is what are you doing with all your responsibilities from sun up to sundown? Are you enjoying it? And eat and drink. Get some food in your belly. This also I found is from the hand of God. Apart from him, who can eat and have enjoyment? In other words, you're blessed by God. You're under his grace if you're finding enjoyment in your work and your food and your drink, and you're satisfied. For to the one who pleases him, God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and heaping, only to give to the one who pleases God. This is also vanity and chasing after the wind. In other words, that rich guy who has it all, where's it going to go when he dies? Ultimately, it's going to go to whom God pleases. It's not necessarily saying, I want to see what it says. To him that is good before God. To him that pleases God. To him that is good as God say. Okay, it is saying that, it's to people who God is pleased with, not saying whoever God pleases. Okay, so he's saying it's ultimately going to the righteous. And I don't know if Solomon is seeing that in his life or if he is seeing that in the ultimate fulfillment of humanity with the righteous ruling at the end. That could be it. Or he might be seeing all the ruins of all the Canaanite cities and stuff like that are now in their possession. That could be it. So he says, so this is what he's saying. He's saying, if you can just eat, work at something you like, and eat and drink and find enjoyment and joy and peace in that what you're doing, well then you're sensing God's grace in your life. Because you could try so hard, but if you're not pleasing to God, you're going to be miserable and you're not going to keep what you got. So he says, for here's his ultimate rationale for everything. Okay, remember, he doesn't know what the end times are going to be like. He doesn't know the millennial kingdom. That has not been prophesied yet. That's not going to come for a couple hundred years. He just says, here's what I see about life in the world. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven. See, God's got a big plan and I don't fully understand it. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planting, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. In other words, all these things that we see, the good, bad, and the ugly, there's purpose to it. He doesn't quite understand the whole purpose of that. But he sees that God has allotted time for all these things. There is a purpose and a place for all of these things. You say, even hate? Yeah, remember, he must hate the mother and father in order to follow me. Right? There's a time for war. There's a time for peace. God will appoint his people to go to war at times, okay? It is necessary because of the big cycle of what God is doing. And we know a lot more about it now because we have the New Testament. Okay, and the reality of it is these are the consequences of giving people free will. Because of that, you have necessary births and dying and wars and loving and hating and collecting and giving away and all these things. Okay, because people have a free will. And because God has a plan to optimize the salvation of many under this program, which he has given people free will. And when you have free creatures, and you're trying to lead everybody into eternal life, and not everyone is going to go, because that's the caveat when you give people free will. You can't make them. You can't make them love you. You can't make them want good. Well, you're going to have a chore on your hands. And God is working this chore, and we're kind of pawns in this game. But it's a good game, because part of that game is saving us despite our wickedness. And it's about God saving as many people as he possibly can, despite the wickedness of all of us, despite our sin, and despite us having free will. And he can't just force us to do it because he gave us free will. He could. He didn't have to give us free will, but he did. That's why he has a free will offering. It's not complicated. So he says, what gain have the workers for their toil? In other words, you don't understand God's big picture. So why are you trying so hard? Why are you trying to change the world, build a kingdom, and accomplish utopia? It's not your plan, it's God's plan. There's a time for all this stuff, time to tear down, which means why are you building up? Think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. He says, I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, now this is where the NRSV is going to fail. He has put the sense of past and future in their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to end. I think that's a horrible translation. Let's see what the American says. He has also set eternity in their heart, yet so that man cannot find out the work that God has done from the beginning and end. He has made their hearts without knowledge. Come on. See, this is when you know there's probably some genuine difficulty in the Hebrew here when you see things that are so different when you go from translation to translation. He says, KJV says he has set the world in their heart, okay? So I agree that this is eternity. This word is olam. Olam can mean, it's like the word aeon in Greek. So an aeon can be an age, it can be the world, or it can be an eternity, okay? Context will tell you. But what he's saying is he has set eternity on their hearts. In other words, it's not entirely wrong when the NRSV says the past and the future, but it's the past and the future for infinity, which is why when you tell people about the beginning, even if they're a little kid, they said, well, who made God? Well, what was before the beginning? They have a sense, an ingrown sense of a knowledge of eternity in them. A kid will automatically say, what came before that? What came before that? Why would you assume that? When I said in the beginning, why wouldn't you just assume that's the beginning? Why would you just assume that there's something before that? And why would you assume there's something after the end of time? Because God has set eternity in their heart. Okay, why? Because He is eternal. This is, if you will, your God-shaped hole. Okay? It's the sense of that something belongs in eternity so that they'll seek after God. That was God's plan. So that no one can find out the work that God makes from beginning into the end. Or this could better be translated, God has set eternity in their hearts so that no man can find out the work of God that He does from beginning to end. In other words, no single man can understand everything that God's doing. We're towards the end of time, and we have the full Bible, assuming God's never going to add to it again. So we know a lot more. But the full end, God has given me quite a bit of revelation knowledge about the beginning to end and what He's doing with history and all the way to the book of Revelation and into eternity. But everything? No. Remember, there's eternity after this. After this world ends, there's eternity. Even if I understood every word in the Bible perfectly and I understand what God's saying and the pictures and the dynamics and the patterns and it's still just this world, then there's eternity. I'm just scratching the surface. But the more I learn, the more I realize there's so much I don't know. I know because I've been studying for 20 years. And I'm much more studied than most people I know. And I think much more deeply than most people I know. And I am constantly seeing the depth and the expanse of what I don't know. But I'm starting to pick up a pattern, and that pattern allows me to help to teach the Bible. But the point is, all the work that God makes from beginning to end, what was God doing in ancient China? What was God doing in ancient Mesoamerica with these people? Because here's the thing. I see what God was doing in Israel because it's all written down. But God wasn't just leaving the Mesoamericans and the Chinese and the Mongols and the Vikings and all these people to just do their own thing and just completely ignoring them. He was doing something with them too. In fact, He's going to get into this in the prophets where He says, you think I brought you up from Egypt? Didn't I bring these Arameans from Kir? And didn't I bring the Philistines from Caphtor? In other words, these other people that are around you, I did something with them too. They have their prophets. They have their signs. They've had angels visit them with lies and other ones with truth. They had righteous people stand up and say, we should do this, not that, and then they get killed, and then the other guy wins, and then the righteous guy loses, and then the righteous guy wins, and then they move to the land where God preserved them from being utterly destroyed by the other people because of their wickedness. He's been doing this with all these people groups throughout humanity the whole time, because God has been in the business by his Spirit to teach humanity to seek after him and to understand that there's a right and wrong and there's consequences to their actions. He's not just like, I'm focused on Israel and the rest of you, I don't care what happens with you. He's not like that. He never says he's like that, okay? He does allow them a certain amount of ignorance until the gospel is preached. But he is certainly not hands-off in the development of all these other nations. And I'm sitting here looking at ancient history and going, what happened with these thousands of years? These rises and falls of civilizations. It's a mystery. There's so much stuff in the Word of God, even though it's written down for me, that I'm never going to understand until Jesus gets back and explains it. I'm never going to understand a lot of these different rituals and stuff like that in Leviticus until Jesus tells me. I ain't got it all. No man can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. No man. And that includes me. I am no man. And so I have to be content with what God has revealed to me thus far and not feel like I need to know everything perfectly. Because it's that kind of striving, too, that turns to a guy starting a denomination around himself or a cult. I figured it out. This is the way. No, I just know what I know, and I know a lot about stuff that's wrong, but I don't know everything that's right. I just know what's wrong because I know some stuff that's right. And so with that, I can deduce that other stuff is wrong. So I can teach you some things, and I might know more than you, but I don't know it all. And I'm not going to start a denomination, and I'm not going to start a cult. I'm just going to be content with what God's given to me, and freely I have been given, so freely I'm going to give. I know that there's nothing better for them than to be happy and to enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in their toil. I'm going to do some eating and drinking and taking pleasure in my toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Whatever God does. See, what Aaron does is going to fade. Okay? They're going to one day shut Christians out of the internet, and there's going to be no more. And maybe there's going to be some people who are like, oh, Aaron's teachings are really good, so I recorded them all on video for you. Well, people used to do that in the 70s and the 80s. Oh, Kenneth Copeland's tapes are so good, I recorded them all for you. I know people who do stuff like this. Kenneth Hagin, these weird guys. This is how these guys started. They would record little cassette tapes, and they'd say, here's all these teachings are so good. And then you find out, no, they're not so good. No, they're not so good. They're not worth saving. Well, if the Lord were to tarry for another 50 years, I can tell you guys, my stuff's not going to be worth saving. You're learning from it now, but what I'm pointing you to is what God does. His work. And what my goal is for you guys to sit here and go, now, I used to listen to the crap out of Chuck Missler. That guy was smart. He was curious. He was intuitive. He saw codes and patterns and stuff. He was brilliant. I don't listen to him anymore. Not because I don't think he's brilliant. He's brilliant, and he accomplished a lot for the Lord with his life. But what he taught me was that all the good stuff he knew was in God's Word. It came from God. And so I started getting invested in God's Word. And in some things, I realized, okay, now I understand what Chuck Missler understands. And in other things, I understand things that Chuck Missler didn't understand. Because I went to the source. And the source wasn't Chuck Missler, it was the Word of God. And in some things, I understand some things that Chuck Missler got wrong. That would be my goal if the Lord tarries for 50 years. With all of you. Yeah, once upon a time, I learned a lot of stuff from this here guy. He's a brother in the Lord. Can't wait to meet him in heaven and give him a high five. But it's not about him. He pointed me to God's Word. And I started realizing, wow, that guy knew a lot of stuff. But what he really had going for him was that he knew where to find the right stuff. And that's in the Word of God. And I've had people that I taught as kids come back to me as adults and show me something I never saw. That's satisfaction. That's how you know you've done your job as a teacher. Whatever God does endures forever. God saved my soul. That's going to endure forever. God wrote his word. That's going to endure forever. And if I led somebody to Christ, well, that's God doing that through me. That's going to be forever. So if somebody comes to me and say, hey, I was bound up in legalistic Roman Catholicism and now I'm going to heaven, and I'm going to give you a high five when I get there. First Jesus, but down the line you, because you were very helpful in my walk. Well, that's something God does. That's going to endure forever. And that's why he's saying, don't store on earth where moth and rust destroys. Store it in heaven, right? The people who you affect to either come to Christ or turn from sin or turn from a bad ideology that was keeping them from growing, or just, moving them away from prioritizing the things of this world and the flesh and towards prioritizing the things of God. You know what's going to be so much better than 1,000 people who like my teaching? Is if some guy who I taught goes on to lead 1,000 people to Christ, and they all like his teaching. But then that guy gets to heaven and he says, I wouldn't have been able to get all this accomplished with my life if God hadn't sent that guy to teach me all this stuff. See, I can tell you where I would have been if I hadn't found Chuck Missler's teaching. I would have been addicted to porn, because that's literally where I was. I found Chuck Missler's teaching on accident while struggling with accidentally finding porn on the internet a lot. Okay? I was a baby Christian. And that's what set me on the course to fall in love with God's word to such a degree. I became such a psychotic nerd for the Bible that I would literally be sitting here in my social studies degree and I would just walk out of class and just sit there and read the Bible. It was so much more interesting. And I would analyze every philosophical thing and historical thing and poli-sci thing and legal thing and all this stuff next to the Bible, because the Bible I understood. Chuck Missler gave me my foundational understanding of the Word of God as a whole thing. So whatever I've accomplished with my life, I can go to Chuck Missler and be like, yeah, he got some stuff wrong. But I wouldn't have been able to do what I did if not for what God did through Chuck Missler. And that's going to go all the way back and all the way back to Jesus, because Chuck Missler learned from somebody and yada, yada, yada. So what God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor taken away from it. Because at the end of the day, all I can teach you is to understand God's word clearly. But at the end of the day, it's not my thoughts that edify you, it's God's thoughts. So I'm not going to add to what God's doing. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. Here's the reality. With all the knowledge and the size of this universe and all the information and all the history and all the philosophies and all the thoughts of the billions of men who have walked this earth, here's the reality. God packaged everything that we need to know to get us from wherever we are in history to eternity in one book that's like this thick. And I can take that book and I can discern all of history, all of thought, all of philosophy, all of human attitudes, all the politics, all the technology, all the science, all the so-called knowledge. I can take this one book and I can cut right through it and tell you what's worthwhile and what's not. That's amazing. I stand in awe before him. And that's just because I have a bent towards information. There's other people who have a bent towards art, towards material creation, towards musical creation. And they'll look at this world and they'll look at God's word and their mind is blown in an entirely different way than my mind is blown, because they're just different. That stuff that they stand in awe of, that doesn't even come on my radar because I'm so ignorant in those areas where they're experts, where they're passionate, where they're gifted and drawn towards. Okay? I'm just happen to be gifted and drawn towards information. And in that, I stand in awe before God. If you're the guy who just loves auto mechanics and you're just like, I just love working on cars, one day you're going to wake up and be like, God invented a flying electromagnetic engine that goes through space and keeps people from being radiated by the sun. by producing a force field. And it's so smooth running. Yeah, it has an earthquake once in a while. It has a hiccup once in a while. If we quit taking the oil off the surface, maybe it would run a little bit more smoother. But it's so smooth running that for the most part, its surface can't even feel it. Imagine having an engine in a car that is not just so powerful it keeps this car running all the time. It doesn't need a battery. It doesn't need fuel. It doesn't need a charge. And oh, by the way, it puts a force field around your car against the sun's radiation so you don't need tint. That's what God made. I'm just an auto mechanic. See, this is me just speculating because I don't know anything about auto mechanics. You could be an auto mechanic and be like, God's amazing. I stand in awe of him. He's amazing. Because everything that we're doing and everything that we're gifted at is just derivative of what God has done. And all gifting is in him. I stand in awe of him. Okay? But you can look at your own uniqueness and go, and yet God made materials in this earth so that I could make an engine. I could do a tiny little version of what God did. Or I like farming and growing horticulture. I can do a tiny little version of what God did. Or I like building buildings. I can do a tiny little version of what God did. And take joy in it to go, God made these materials to work together in such a way that metal is so much more dense than wood, that a nail goes through wood and holds wood together, which is really hard already. I can build a structure around it. I can put stones around it. I can make it look cool, and I can make a fireplace come up. I can make this amazing kitchen because I want to make a steak indoors without having grease and smoke everywhere. And God knows how to do all that. He pre-designed all the materials because he knew he likes his steaks too, the gristly parts. And you can't just have smoke up in your face and grease up all over the kitchen because your wife will be furious. He knows, and so he designed it that way. He's amazing. I stand in awe of him. Why? Because I like steaks. That's why. And whoever you are, I don't care if this world likes to chart your giftings and chart your bent and your passions and stuff like that and be like, the high level ones are the ones that make you the most money. No, they're not. Okay? Some of the best people I know and the most enjoyable people I like to be around are not rich. But they have a passion for something. And they could be very poor by normal standards. They love their wife. They love their kids. Houses are getting, the bills are getting paid. The kids are clothed and fed. They're fine. But they're so good at certain things. And they do it with such care. I'm amazed by them. They never went to college. Maybe they don't have as much money as I do. But I'm blown away by what they've accomplished with their life. The world tells you first is the people who rule, and then the people who have money, and then the people who are famous, and then the people who, are skilled, and then the people who went to college, and then the lay people, and, the skilled trades down here, and then the guys, the poopsmiths at the bottom. I met a poopsmith. It wasn't an actual poopsmith, but this guy was working at a wastewater treatment plant. Okay, so he kind of was a poopsmith. And this guy was passionate about what he's doing. And he's literally showing us this is literally the city's raw sewage coming through. And they named, because apparently people throw condoms down the toilet and then they puff up, and so they call them trout as a joke, and he's just telling us and he's laughing about it. And everything smells like poop. And we're all like sitting here like this in college. Everything smells like poop. And this guy's into chemistry and into bio stuff, and he turns that poop into fertilizer and that raw sewage into clean water that goes in the river. That's as clean as the water in the river. And he's passionate about what he's doing. He loves what he's doing. He's the poopsmith, and yet he's amazing at it. And we could sit here and go, and that, because of that guy, our food grows better, and the water that goes into Lake Michigan from the Grand River is clean. We're not just filling up the water with raw sewage because of that guy and his passion for poop. He's the poop smith. He's not worthless. He's great. He's amazing. God made him amazing. I stand in awe before him. Okay? That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. What does that mean? He's saying, this is not fatalistic determinism. He's saying life is going to keep going through these cycles. Remember, he was just talking about it's all vanity because everything that has been will be, okay? But God seeks what has gone by. In other words, what does that mean? It means everything's done to God. It's not the process that concerns God, it's you. Yeah, but how did you respond when you lost your job? How did you respond with that breakup? How did you respond with that political situation? These things are going to keep happening, but they're there to test your heart. What happened with you? What happened with you when your son rebelled? What happened with you when you got rich? What happened with you when you got poor? How did you respond? That's what he's interested in. What happened? I sinned, Lord, I did this. Then we got to work on your heart, huh? Yeah. Okay, we got to work on your heart. Okay, that's what happened. God seeks out what happened. What happened, says God. Not, here's what happened with the circumstances. What happened with you? That's what concerns God. He knows about all the stuff that's going on around you. This stuff keeps happening. Empires rise and fall. People get rich and poor. Everybody wants to be with somebody. And many people, almost nobody, gets the first person they look at and want. So you're going to cheat? You're going to go after another man's wife? I can tell you there are very few people alive who are like, first girl I ever wanted to kiss was the one I married to, and I stayed married to her, and nobody else wanted her, just me, and she didn't want anyone else, just me, and we stayed and lived happily ever after. Not reality. The reality is my first girlfriend, then my second girlfriend, then my third girlfriend, and her first boyfriend, and her second boyfriend, and her third boyfriend, and then we met each other, and then we got along, but then this other guy started talking to her, and then I had to be like, yeah, but we're committed, and then she's like, well, you're not being that nice to me, and he is, and then it went back and forth, and we got a divorce. Oh, but no, maybe we didn't get a divorce, we went to counseling, and it got better, and up and down, and up and down, and up and down. How did you respond? That's what God's interested in. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in place of justice, wickedness is there. And in place of righteousness, wickedness was there as well. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for he has appointed a time for every matter and every work. I said in my heart with regard to human beings that God is testing them to show that they are but animals. See? He's testing your heart. How you respond. You gonna act like an animal? Or you gonna act like a son of God? For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantage over animals, for all this is vanity. See, animals act the way they act because they're going to die. They have to procreate. Instinctively, they know they have to procreate. They have to win. They have to fight. They have to eat. They have to have sex. There's nothing going on but that. They have to procreate. They have a command to be fruitful and multiply. Okay? That's their program. And anything that's going to obstruct that, well, they're just going to handle it like animals. Oh, bird says my eggs got touched by a human. They smell like a human. They're probably tainted. Throw all my kids away. Start over. Oh, looks like we got to eat our kids and start over. Animals do that. Oh, looks like I got to kill my mate who I just gotten impregnated by. Animals do that. Why? He served his purpose. That's why. Now I need the protein. Animals do that. They have one command. They don't have a command to love your neighbor. They have a command to be fruitful and multiply. And so they do. But we're different. We have a command to love our neighbor. So I'm not going to kill another man so I can have his wife so I can be fruitful and multiply. Yes, I have a command to be fruitful and multiply, but not at the expense of killing other people. That's robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's not how we do these things. So God's testing us to find out, are you going to be like an animal or are you going to be different? Are you going to be like God? Turns out there's more than one way to be fruitful and multiply. Did you know I can be fruitful and multiply kids? Or I can be fruitful and multiply converts for Christ? And if I be fruitful and multiply kids and those kids don't go to heaven, nothing endures for eternity. But if I multiply converts to Christ, it's like I have a bunch of kids in eternity. Maybe Paul was onto something when he stayed single. Maybe he's going to have a lot more people looking up to him in eternity than Solomon, who had 1,000 wives and probably thousands of kids. You ever think about that? All go to one place, all are from the dust, and they turn to dust again. See, he's not thinking about heaven and eternity and the gospel and everlasting life and the kingdom come. He doesn't know about these things. In his world, people die and they go to Sheol. What do they go to Sheol for? How? Await judgment, I guess? I don't know. They know there's going to be a resurrection the last day because that's in Job. And my inclination is that Job came to Solomon through the Edomites. Because remember, he's married in with the Edomites. Okay? So that's probably where Job comes into the Bible, even though it's older than the Bible. So they know that there's going to be a resurrection in the last days because Job apparently know that. And probably Shem knew some stuff, and they probably have some stuff that originated with Shem. But who can know? We don't know. What they see is they go down to the dust again. Why? Well, because they have the law of Moses. They don't have the prophets yet. They have the law of Moses. Maybe they've got Joshua and Judges. The Psalms are probably there, but they're probably not composed into a book. And this is Solomon talking. And he's like, this is what we know. People go down to the dust again. That's what God said to Adam. Same thing happens with the animals. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward and the spirit of animals goes downward into the earth? Now, we have a belief in an underworld, which the Jews called Sheol, and they had this belief in the underworld all over from before the flood. We know this. But there is no promise necessarily that the human spirit after it dies goes to heaven in the Bible at this time. We have Enoch, who was caught up to God, but that was a special case. All we know is it seems like everything just goes down. So he said, I saw there's nothing better that they should enjoy their work, for that's their lot. What did God gift you at? Find the purpose in what God gave you in your circumstances. Find the joy in what God gave you in your circumstances. Don't look at somebody who's different than you and say, why am I not like them? They got their ups and downs too. It's not about that. Some people are kings, some people are paupers. Some people are track athletes, and some people are born without arms and legs. And I've seen a guy without arms and legs looking way happier than the track athlete who won all the golds. Okay? That guy tried to turn himself into a woman, and the guy with no arms and legs has millions of dollars and is preaching the gospel. And he's got a beautiful wife and kids. So keep that in mind. The guy who cut himself up and turned himself into a woman was an Olympic triathlete, and the guy with no arms and legs is now starting his own bank with his beautiful wife and kids and going on speaking tours around the country and telling people about Jesus full of joy. He's never not smiling. The other guy is getting some Botox for his fake lips, fake boobies, fake everything. Two dudes. One was an Olympic triathlete. One had no arms and legs. Okay? Now, again, I saw all the oppressions that were practiced under the sun. Look, the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors, there was power with no one to comfort them. In other words, bad guys seem to win. They seem to have an advantage. People who are oppressed seem to not have an advocate, anyone to help them in the world. It just seems to be that way. I live in the richest country the world has ever known. I am living a roughly middle-class lifestyle in that culture. I don't have any major complaints. When I complain, the Lord rebukes me, and he's right too. Okay? There are people who have been sold into sex trafficking. There are people who have had their limbs cut off. There are people who have been forced to shoot their parents with a gun and join an army when they were a little kid. I do not have it bad, but they are oppressed with no one to comfort them. I don't know how to go fix Africa or the Middle East or Southeast Asia. There are people who are sent out to do that. I am not one of those people. I feel sad about that. Sometimes I have to just not think about it so I don't feel sad all the time. Solomon is aware of these things. It was like that in his day too. Remember, he's buying male and female slaves. So he knows. And I thought the dead who have already died more fortunate than those who are alive. Better off to be in Sheol. But better than both is one who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. It's better to never be born. This sucks. Then I saw all the toil and all the skill in work that comes from every person's envy of another. This also is vanity and chasing after the wind. In other words, he's saying everything people do when they toil, when they strive in skill, in work, is out of envy towards one another. I have to tell you, when I write my books, in my heart, I have to regularly tell my flesh, it's not about competing with other people. It's about doing your best for God. I don't need my books to outsell anyone else's books. I don't need my channel to outgrow anyone else's channel. Because that's in my flesh. It's constantly beckoning at me. Whatever you do, think about other people who are doing it. Oh man, Mike Winger has 1 million subscribers. I'm never going to catch up to him. So what? Rejoice that Mike Winger is reaching people with the gospel. But it's there in your flesh. But I'm better at discernment. I know the end times better. This is your flesh. It's just like, so it's got to be better. My book's got to be better. It's got to be the best translation, best Bible translation ever. My Revelations book's got to be the best book ever. My church history book has to be the best book ever. It has to be the best ever or I feel miserable. Why? Why? Why does it have to be, when you say best ever, compared to what? And you're saying other people, other people's books, other people's channels, other people's works, other people's pile of money, other people's life. This is what we constantly do in our flesh. Why? Wait a minute. Are you walking towards God? Yeah. Is God happy with you? Yeah. Are you happy with him? Well, maybe you should talk to him about that. What are you unhappy about? Well, maybe you should talk to him about that. But the point is, it's about you and your former self. It's about your former self, which was dirt, and your former self that acted dirty, and your future self, which is like God and is going to act godly. This is the comparison. That's the only point of comparison. And Paul's going to talk about that in Corinthians. He's saying, if we get to a point where we stop comparing ourselves with one another and start comparing ourselves with our former selves, we're going to be a lot happier. See, when I look at my former self, I'm going to go, man, porn addiction, drug addiction, in and out of jail, in and out of mental hospitals, couldn't keep a job, poor. Now I'm not thinking about money and just writing books. Yeah, but I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have this. That other guy has this, that other guy has that. I would like a wife and kids. I would like to have a nice house with a big grill so I could cook a steak indoors without getting grease all over the place. And my wife is happy because I'm not doing that. Might not happen in this life. But if I focus on that and lose track of all the stuff that God has delivered me from, God's delivered me from a lot. So I don't compare myself to what other people have. That guy's a porn addict and he has a wife. Not fair, God. That guy's a jerk and a thief and he has a wife. Not fair, God. That guy is all the things that you've delivered me from and he still has a wife. Not fair, God. No. This is vanity and chasing after the wind. Why are you trying to compare yourself with other people? Do you want all of his flaws that God delivered you from so that you can have his wife? No. Okay. So don't compare yourself to him. God is doing something totally different in that guy's life and his wife's life. Don't compare. You seek God And if there's things you're not happy about and things you want, we'll talk to God about that. And listen to what he says in response, okay? Maybe he's still working on you. Maybe he's still preparing you. Maybe he's still preparing somebody for you. Maybe you're not going to get married. Maybe you're going to spend the rest of your life like a Paul. Maybe the world's ending and there's going to be a ton of people who never get married. That's probably more likely. Maybe God is picking you to lead the charge in that and be like, relax, people. It's about the gospel and not about the white picket fence. Maybe that's it. The point is, you're not in mental hospitals anymore. You're not in jails anymore. You're not homeless anymore. That's awesome. So, he says, all that striving is no good to compare yourself with others. Neither, he says, fools fold their hands and consume their own flesh. Neither is being a lazy bum. Well, then I'm not just going to try. I can't be the best, so I'm not going to try. Better is a handful with quiet than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. In other words, moderation. Better to have something. Just try. Well, there you go. I have a roof over my head. My body is healthier than it was. I have some friends. I have people that like me. I have people that I like. I have actions of ministry that I can do. I have something to do with my time. I enjoy my food. I enjoy the company of certain people. Sometimes I have extra to give. Better is a handful with quiet, peace, than 2 handfuls with toil. Maybe I have it all, but are you happy? No. Then it's not worth it. Again, I saw Vanity on the Sun. A case of solitary individuals without sons or brothers. Yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Some people keep striving for the thing, and they end up alone. There are many, many people who have gotten to that VP spot, and it cost them a marriage. More often than not, that is the case. They have had to step over people, burn people, betray people to get to the top. Now they're at the top and they're alone. How you like me now? Your Wall Street guys, when you hear about these, like Wolf of Wall Street and The Boiler Room and these movies that depict these Wall Street guys who trade and they make all these monies and then they go to the strip club. That's real life. Now think about that. Think about or they go gambling. Think about these guys who make millions of dollars. They are literally at the top of the capitalist system. They're smart people. These people are very intelligent people who have figured out where to make the most amount of money legally. Rags to riches. I met these guys who are going to get into the stock trading down in North Carolina. These 4 guys were going to go and rent an apartment together. And I think the apartment was it was absurd. It was like $60,000 a month. It was like in Manhattan. These 4 guys right out of college, $60,000 a month for an apartment. A month. And I said, how can you spend that much money in an apartment? I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was something like that. Maybe it was $60,000. No, it was $60,000 a month. He said, how can you spend that much money on an apartment? He said, because we're going to make so much money in what we're doing. It's an investment. They're going to go trade on Wall Street for a living. These guys are really smart at math. They get to that place, and then what do so many of them end up doing? They buy a flashy sports car. They pay an absurd amount of money to live in Manhattan. And then they spend their money on strippers who just hang around Manhattan because they know there's so much money flying around. Or Vegas because they know there's so much money flying around. And these are women who just show off their butts for money. And these are guys who don't have a real relationship. They're deeply empty and lonely, stuffing dollar bills into the panties of women who don't give a crap about them. Because it's all just a game. Just get the money, get the money, get the money. And there's a lot of money flowing from that volcano of evil. And all around it, the evil gather. because they want the money. And most of those people end up bottom up. When you hear these stories about like 1929 when the stock market crashed and people were jumping out of windows because the stock market crashed, how absurd is that? Like, okay, you lost your money, so now you're going to commit suicide? These people are so empty inside that the idea of just going and getting a regular job, I mean, I might be a greeter at Walmart one day because I'm like, yeah, I thought the Lord was going to come soon, and so I dropped this $250,000 a year business, and I just lived off my savings too long, teaching the gospel and making YouTube videos and writing books that didn't sell that fast. And next thing you know, I'm like, wow, turns out inflation was a real thing, and I'm broke, and now I got to get a job as a greeter at Walmart because I'm old and my job skills are rusty. That's it. Greeter at Walmart. The worst place in human existence. But I would do that, especially if I had a family to take care of. I'll work at a McDonald's if I got a family to take care of. Well, but the people aren't going to be impressed with you. Well, I don't care if my kids are getting fed. They're going to be impressed, or somewhat impressed. And then I'm going to go home and tell them I love them, and that's why I work at McDonald's. And I'm going to come home with free McDonald's food, and they're going to like me all the more. So who's laughing now? There's these people who are so rich, and they're so miserable. And I've met them. It's a real thing. These are not tropes for movies. They're very powerful people who get high up there, making $500,000 a year. Big, huge sacrifices. They're always traveling. Family's miserable. And then when they see their family, they have to spend all this extra money on them because they have to make up for the fact that they're always gone. So it's constantly flying for business and then flying for vacation. And then you have to buy your wife all this stuff to make up for the fact that you're gone. And what they really want is a guy who's around, who cares about them, that they can go out to dinner with once in a while, and that they can, laugh at the kids together and watch movies together and have a little wine at the end of the day. And it turns out you could have all that for making 25% as much money as you're making. You could add all that in spades. But when you make money, you end up finding that everything around you keeps getting more expensive because this world is like vultures, and they'll demand you spend the money. It's hard to make a bunch of money and live reasonably. People want that money. So they say, why am I toiling? Why am I depriving myself of pleasure? This is all also vanity and an unhappy business. Two are better than one because they have a reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help. In other words, it's better to have friends than money. It's better to have friends than money. There are people who will say, yeah, I'll help you. Give me your money and I'll help you. Friends will help you and there's no money in it. Or a brother. They will. Okay? He says, better to have friends and brothers than money. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? This is talking more about a husband and wife scenario. So it's better to find a good wife than it is to find a bunch of money. Because at least that wife can keep you warm at night. And though one might prevail against another, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And this is kind of a metaphor, and I think it's meant to represent you, your wife, and God. I think. Better is the poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer takes advice. One can indeed come out of prison to reign, even though born poor in the kingdom. In other words, he's seen it all. Remember, in his days, some guys come and take over Damascus. So he's seen the poor come and become kings. He knows the stories. I saw the living who, moving about in the sun, follow the youth who replaced the king. There was no end to all the people whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice him. Surely this is also vanity and taking after the wind. Now you've seen the guy who came up from the streets and ended up being the king, and everybody followed him. But once he died, he's nobody. Nobody remembered him. So don't strive to get to the top. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near and listen is better than sacrifice offered by fools, for they do not know how to keep from doing evil. Never be rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. If I have to talk about my biggest regrets in life, and I've done a lot of stupid things that other people know, the worst things are the things I have uttered in the privacy of nobody hearing me but God, against God. Because I didn't know what God was doing, or because I was just being a punk. I was just being a baby because I was sick, or I wasn't feeling good, or I was frustrated, or I was fearful, or whatever it was, and I rashly railed out against God in my frustration, like a baby throwing a temper tantrum. And God is patient, He knows, but I wish I was better at this. Not be rash with your mouth, not let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. If there's one thing I'm like, yeah, you want to find a better teacher than me for this, Mike Wigger's probably your guy. This here is not exemplary. I'm more this guy who needs to take this advice. For God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. My words are many. For dreams come with many cares, and a fool's voice with many words. See, that's me. I'm a fool's voice. If I were wiser, I would probably find ways to say things more succinctly and more effectively, and probably talk less in general. But I am a fool learning to be wise, not a wise person talking down to others. The good thing is we live in a nation full of fools, and so on a curve, I'm not doing so bad. When you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it, for He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than you should vow and not fulfill it. I've made a couple vows to God that I regret, and I wonder if I'm stuck with them. Careful what you say. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your words and destroy the work of your hands? With many dreams come vanities and a multitude of words, but fear God. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of the justice of the right, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by the higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. So what is the point? Everybody's going to get their comeuppance in time. It's awful, I know, but don't spend your life stressing over it. Everybody's going to get theirs in time. It's important to know that, because you're going to find corruption wherever you go. You're going to find it in business. You're going to find it in politics. You're going to find it in the cops. You're going to find it everywhere. You're going to find it in yourself. It's everywhere. Everybody gets their comeuppance in time. Fear God and do the right thing. But all things considered, this is an advantage for the land. A king, but all things considered, this is an advantage for a land, a king for a plowed field. What does that mean? I think what he's saying is, all things considered, it's better to have a government than have chaos. The king himself is served by the field. I think that's what he's saying. Is it's better. All governments are corrupt, but it's better to have a government than anarchy. That's what I think is what he's saying. Because let's face it, if you had anarchy, they'd be grabbing your kids. They just would. The lover of money will not be satisfied with money, nor the lover of wealth with gain. This also is vanity. When goods increase, those who eat them increase. And what gain has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of laborers, whether they eat little or much, but the surfeit of the rich will not let them sleep. There is a grievous ill that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owners to their hurt. So in other words, being rich doesn't necessarily make you happier. And those riches were lost in a bad venture, though they are parents of children, they have nothing in their hands. You lost it in a bad investment. As they came from their mother's womb, so shall they go again, naked as they came. They shall take nothing for their toil, which they carry away with their hands. This tells me Solomon was probably reading Job. And what you find is there's many things that are said first in Job that show up in the Proverbs. I think some of it shows up in the Psalms. I could be mistaken. But definitely it shows up in the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Which tells me, remember, in David's day, they conquered Edom. In Solomon's day, he was marrying in with the nobles of Edom. So somewhere around this time, they probably got the book of Job, and they're drawing wisdom from the book of Job and putting it into their own writings. This also is a grievous ill. Just as they came, so shall they go. And what gain do they have from toiling for the wind? Besides all their days, they eat in darkness, in much vexation, and sickness, and resentment. This is what I have seen to be good. It is fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil which one does under the sun, the few days of the life God gives us, for this is our lot. So he's going to keep coming back to this. Just find something you like to do and just do it and be joyful. Likewise, all to whom God gives wealth and possessions and whom he enables to enjoy them and to accept their lot and find enjoyment in their toil, this is the gift of God. In other words, if you have been blessed with wealth and riches, it's not wrong to enjoy them. It's not wrong to have nice things. It says, for they will scarcely brood over the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with the joy of their hearts. In other words, it's a gift. It is a gift, and recognize that it is a gift. It's not because you're greater. It's not because you're better. It's not because you work so hard. Maybe you did work hard, but it's God's grace. There's a ton of people who work just as hard as you do and don't have those riches. Okay? Tons of people fail in business. Tons of people fail in business. So what do you want to do? This is my advice when it comes to money. Be honest how you make it. Pay your taxes. Be generous in how you spend it, and then enjoy it. That's it. Don't cheat. If you have good money, don't you dare cheat on your taxes. If you make more than other people, you shouldn't pay your taxes, period. But if you make good money, don't you dare be ducking taxes by doing anything that's even hints at feeling dishonest. Okay? There's so many ways you can cut corners. Don't you dare cut corners in how you make your money. And just be generous. If you have a lot, give. Don't think because you make 10x what other people make, you have to live 10x what other people live. Live 2x what other people live and give some away and save some and invest some. Okay? Live 5x. That's fine. But don't think you have to live 10x because you make 10x. Don't peek out. There are people sitting here inventing a ridiculously expensive car for people like you. There are people sitting here inventing a super luxe plane with like white tiger endangered poached skin seats for you. This is your Saudi royals, right? These people have tons of money and they're worthless people. None of them work. They just pump oil out of the ground and they're rich because they started out as a puppet government and now they think they're somebody. And so what do? People show up with stupid lucks. How would you like a gold-plated gun? Like, this is... Why? Why would you want a gold-plated gun? It's soft and it melts. Well, I'm not really going to shoot anyone with it. It just looks really freaking cool. All right. Don't bling. Don't get a big gold watch. Don't get your teeth all blinged out. Just be generous and then enjoy yourself. Pay your taxes, fool. That's it. There's an evil that I've seen in the sun, and it lies heavy upon mankind, to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing of all they desire, yet God does not enable them to enjoy these things, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity, and this is a grievous ill. You get all this money, and you don't even enjoy it. There are some people who are the opposite now. Their goal is to pile up money and riches. Now, maybe these people are being secretly generous and they're just really good at not letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing. Maybe they are. But there are people that are so rich and you would not know it because they go so far out of their way to look poor and not really enjoy it. A man may beget 100 children and live many years, but however many are the days of his years, if he does not enjoy his life's good things, he has no burial. And I say that a stillborn child is better than he. So in other words, if you're going to work hard and make all that money, enjoy it. And let others enjoy it with you. You don't just pile it up. For it comes to vanity and goes into darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. I think they're talking about his riches. Oh no, he's talking about a stillborn. Okay. So it's better if you're never born. You made all that money and you still not enjoying it? Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to one place? All human toil is for the mouth, yet the appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage have wise over the fools, and what do the poor have who do not know how to conduct themselves before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This is vanity and chasing after the wind. So I don't know why he says, and what have the poor, and what do the poor have who do not know how to conduct themselves before the living? I'm not sure what he's getting at right there. But here when he's saying better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire, in other words, better to be satisfied with what's before you than what you imagine. This is vanity, okay? Learn to be content in whatever you have. Maybe God will give you more. Maybe God will give you more. We'll see. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what human beings are, and that they are not able to dispute with those who are stronger. Whatever's come to be has already been named, and it is known what human beings are, and that they are not able to dispute with those who are stronger. The more words, the more vanity. So how is one the better? For who knows what is good for mortals while they live a few days in their vain lives, which pass like a shadow? For who can tell them what will be after them under the sun? So what he sounds like he's saying here is that he's getting after the poor who are trying to. This is probably like a rebuke to what might be considered like communism or whatever. That the poor think it would be better if they had more, and he's talking about their wandering of the eyes and wanting to have what other people have, and he's saying. The world has always been like this. You're not going to unrich the rich. Okay, and this is true. People who want to think they're going to have a socialist revolution and overthrow the 1% are just going to trade that 1% for another 1%, which is the political class. That's what communism is. It takes the bureaucracy, the people who are in charge of distributing the wealth of the rich. The rich stop making money, and then everybody gets poorer in the whole system. And then the people who are in charge of taking from the rich and giving to the poor are the ones who have all the extra stuff. Because it's corrupt. It's a kleptocracy at the end of the day. This is how every communist state has ever worked. It's either turned into one big dictator who has everything and everyone's miserable except his cronies, or it's a large group of cronies and the dictator is on top, but there's a bunch of people who are in this corrupt system, and he's got to keep them all appeased, like China or Russia. That's how they ends up. Communist systems don't work, and so he's saying, "What has been named already, and it is known, that it is man. Neither can he contend with one that is mightier than he." So it's kind of God's dictate who's rich and who's poor. So don't try to make a stink about it, okay? Yes, there are people who make money unjustly. They're going to get theirs in time. Yes, there are people who are corrupt in government. They're going to get theirs in time. But it's not for you to try to right the system, okay? You have to trust God with this. So then he says, "For who knows what is good for man for his life than days in the vain that he spends in shadow? For who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun?" In other words, you don't know what's coming down the line, okay? The point he's making is that these things keep happening in cycles. So don't try to fix it. Chicken broth. There's an evil that I've seen under the sun that lies heavy on mankind. Oh. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go in the house of mourning than to go into the house of feasting, for this is the end of everyone. And the living will lay it to heart. You're going to say it's better to go to a funeral than to go to a party? Yes. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of countenance, the heart is made glad. Why? Because this life is sad. We live in a world of sin. And if you live in a world of sin and you find yourself rejoicing in pleasure, you're not getting the message. This world is sad because people die. And when you go to a funeral, you remember that. And you mourn. And those who mourn will be comforted, okay? There's something joyful about sadness. When you can just mourn. It's different between anger and frustration, okay? You have one of two ways to deal with what is unhappy. You can deal with it with sadness and mourning, or you can deal with it with anger and frustration. Anger and frustration doesn't accomplish anything. It just makes you more miserable, and you'll probably end up saying something you regret against God. Sadness is just pouring out your heart to God because it is sad, and it's sad for him too when people die. It's sad for him too when the poor are oppressed. God doesn't like it either. He thinks this system sucks. That's why he's here to, for a limited time, get a rescue mission so he can bring people in a new system where people understand how bad it is when people use their free will to sin. See, God optimizes for freedom. That's why he started out with just one rule. And that one rule was not there to tool with people. It was there to say God is allowed to have something to his own that you can't touch, and you know it's there. Why? Because that is a test to show you can't be God. That was the point he was trying to make. You can't be God. It was to teach you that you're not the top of the heap. Little kids need to learn that. I dated a girl once whose kid, I had to tell him, hey, you're not in charge of my house. And he goes stomping off, and he's like, yes, I am. He literally said, I'm in charge of your house. He's 4. He's a tiny 4, too. And I'm just like, that kid's going to get his butt kicked one day. You don't instinctively know this as a human being with free will. He had lived and said, I pretty much get whatever I want from my mom when I scream, and then I go over to this guy's house and I don't. I'm God here too. No, you will think you're God. You have to teach people that they're not God. It's a consequence. It's not a consequence of sin. It's a consequence of free will. You have to teach people, yes, you're free, but there are limitations to what you can do with your freedom. We live in a free country here in America. It doesn't mean I get to go murder my next door neighbor because I want to take a ride in his Maserati. There's limits to your freedom. And God optimizes for freedom, and he wants us to have freedom, but with that freedom, with great power comes great responsibilities, Spider-Man. So, you need to learn that this system requires mourning. And if you want a system without mourning, well, then you need to be responsible. That means understand you have a free will and understand there are consequences to your actions and choose to do the right thing. And in order to be responsible and free to be responsible, you have to be free from the fear of death. Death keeps us all in bondage. We want to be free from that. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness the countenance of the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. In other words, the wise are at the funeral saying, oh God, when will death end? The fools are at the club saying, YOLO! Saying, we're going to party like it's 1999. We're going to party till the world ends. It is better to hear a rebuke of the wise than hear the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This also is vanity. Like the crackling of thorns under a pot. It's like cackling. Surely oppression makes the wise foolish, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. The patient in spirit are better than the proud in spirit. Do not be quick to anger, for anger lodges in the bosoms of fools. Remember what I was talking about, being about angry, then being sorrow? Your sorrow expresses a patience at what is going on. I'm sad, but let the feeling come. Let the feeling happen. Anger is trying to say, I don't want to be sad, so I need to control and change the circumstances. No, maybe you can't. Maybe you need to accept it with patience. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. It sucked for them too. Okay? The good old days never really existed. The people who talk about the good old days are just watching film of the good old days, which I promise you, nobody was like highlighting the bad parts on the production floor. Wisdom is as good as inheritance and an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to the one who possesses it. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? You're not going to fix what God's done. Why has God allowed the world to be corrupted like this? There's a purpose to it. What is the purpose? Well, wise people in the New Testament said it's so we can figure out that we need God in order to be right. It's the consequence of us trying to be God instead of God. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. In the day of adversity, consider. God has made one as well as the other, so that mortals may not find out anything that will come after them. God is over the good times and the bad. This is the lesson of Job. We glorify God when things are great. Should we not glorify God when things suck? Yes, you should. Why? Because your good stuff came from God, and your bad stuff ultimately is under God's jurisdiction and care. He is not allowing you to suffer. Remember, I say allowing you to suffer. Okay, there are people who will be like, John Piper says God ordained child rape or whatever. Well, ordained or allowed, see, they don't like to use the word allowed. Yes, God allows child rape. I don't know if you know this, but if God did not allow child rape wouldn't happen, period. So he allows it. Ordains, what does that mean? Okay, he's over it. It's happening under his jurisdiction. But God's jurisdiction, he gives sub-jurisdiction to angels, to men, and they will ultimately bear the consequences for what they've allowed to happen under his dominion, because God certainly is. Yeah, sure, go ahead. That's why he says about child sacrifice, that never entered into my mind. But there are angels under God's jurisdiction who allowed that to happen in his domain. It's like having a company where you have a good, solid Christian CEO, but you have a crappy, evil, satanic manager in one department. Well, eventually that manager is going to go. But it is the responsibility of the CEO that guy's underneath him. And it's ultimately going to be him that makes the decision. But God is not unaware of what's going on. So why is he allowing it? Well, his purpose is for us to see. Remember, God can heal all wounds. I know murdering and raping and all that stuff is awful. But God can heal all wounds. He can make new. Okay? You're not going to be resurrected with your trauma. It will be in the distant past. It's like I have humiliating experiences from my past life of sin that are now, I don't even care about them anymore. I can talk about things like being thrown into a mental hospital without shame. Why? It's not who I am. I know other Christians are like, you shouldn't talk about that because people will think ill of you. Well, if they think ill of me, they're not very good Christians. If I can say that I was Batman crazy, except not man, and God delivered me from that and made me sane and reasonable and able to think and communicate and make money and live a life of peace and law-abiding citizenship, then I'm going to rejoice in my past failings and God's redeeming me from them. And if people can't hear that, then they have a very pharisaical view of life and think they're better, and they're not. They just failed in different ways. So he's saying God is over the good and the bad. Some things were my fault, some things were not. Some things I did, some things were done to me. God's over all that. Because at the end of all this, there's an ultimate lesson that God is saying. Fear God, walk in his paths, and don't expect your life to be suffering free. But there's a purpose to all this, and in the end, you will see it. And it was good. Even things that God has allowed that you find horrid. Why did he allow that? There's purpose, and it's all good. And I'm not saying that God ordains these wicked things. What I'm saying is that he allows wicked things to take place, and he redeems that evil that men do with their free will for his good purposes. So just be careful. Be patient with what's going on. And it sucks. I'm not saying it doesn't suck. It's okay to mourn. But don't let that turn to anger and bitterness. In my vain life I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in the righteous, and there are wicked people who prolong their life in evil doing. Do not be too righteous, and do not act too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be too wicked, and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? In other words, what is he saying? Don't try to be perfect. Don't be an idiot, but don't try to be perfect, okay? By being perfect, you're not going to add years to your life. Just try to be good. It is good that you should take hold of the one without letting go of the other. In other words, try to be righteous, but recognize that you are a fool. Allow yourself some foolishness so you don't spend all your life beating up at yourself and other people. For the one who fears God shall succeed with both. In other words, you are a fool who is striving after righteousness. That's who we are. But if you fear God, you'll be all right. That's who we are. I am flesh. I'm also the righteousness of Christ. Don't lose sight of who you are. Laugh about your foolishness. Be honest about your mistakes. Let other people know you're not so great. Don't try to be so perfect. Don't try to look so perfect. Don't try to get everything right. You're going to end up eating yourself alive, and then you're going to end up turning on everybody else. Because you're going to feel ashamed that you're not perfect, and then look around at other people and say, but they're even worse than me, and then you're just going to hate everyone. Try to be righteous, but recognize that you are a fool. We're fools. We don't know anything. God knows everything. Why are we trying to compete with him over who's more right? He knows everything. We know nothing. Okay? He said, it is good that you should take hold of one without letting go of other, for he who fears God succeeds both. He knows everything. We know nothing. That should be the end of your conversation with God when you're upset. That was the end of Job's conversation with God when he was upset. I've had many conversations that I know that. You know everything. I know nothing. I'm sorry for everything I said. And then I feel better when I finally get away from my anger and get to mourning. Okay, I'm just sad. I'm just sad that I don't enjoy this. And then you just, get your tears out and go for a walk. Get back up, dust yourself off, try again. Surely there's no one on earth so righteous as to do good without ever sinning. You got that? No one on earth. I've actually met people who are like, I've never really sinned before. Like, you're so ignorant of what sin is that you never really sinned. You think you never really sinned before. Everything I do is righteous. No, I've met people like this. It's terrifying. And they're nice, and they're well-behaved, and they're pretty, and they're smart, and blah, 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 and they literally think they're righteous. There's no one on earth that is so righteous that they do good without sinning. No one on earth. So if you think that's you want to read this verse first and say either God's right or you're right. Either Solomon's the wisest person on earth or you are. Because he said no one. And that means you. Your heart knows that many times you have yourself cursed others. So I'm thinking of a particular person who actually said out loud in my presence that everything she does is righteous and that she's never really sinned before. This same person, if you cross her one time, I've seen the look on her face. You're dead to me. Gone. Your heart knows that you've cursed others. You're dead to me. Because I'm righteous and nobody makes fun of me. All if I have tested by wisdom, I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which is far off, and deep, very deep. Who can find it out? That which is. So the Greeks call God the it is. Okay? That which is far off. The eternal is. Okay? And deep, very deep. Who can find it out? Okay? So what are they saying? All that is. So this is how the Greeks didn't distinguish between God and ultimate reality. Okay, so sometimes they would talk about God in personhood. Sometimes they would talk about God in being, or is, or just is. It's what is it? It's a something. It's a something that just is, that is bigger than the universe. And they believed in creation, so they'd say, well, it's just the it is. What pre-exists creation? It's the it is. It's the supreme being. So that's how their God became the supreme being. But the point is that which is far off and deep. Very deep. Who can find it out? In other words, you can't get outside the universe to figure out what's going on outside of there. I turn my mind to know and search out and to seek wisdom in the sum of things, and to know that wickedness is folly and that foolishness is madness. I found more bitter than death a woman who is a trap, whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. One who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. So that's why you wrote so much about that in the Proverbs. Are you trying to say out of the 1,000 women that you clearly were sleeping with, that one of them might have been a Jezebel? I think several were a Jezebel. And, yeah, the righteous escapes her, but not Solomon, because he ended up with a bunch of temples of Baals and stuff. See, this is what I found, says the teacher. Adding one thing to another finds the sum, which my mind has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. In other words, I've searched out all the philosophy and all the religions and all the stuff, because my stupid wives got me to look at all the other religions too, and their gods and blah, blah, blah. And he said, adding to one to another, all these different religions together, I could not figure out what the it is, okay? So this is how you know. This language, see, those of you who know Greek philosophy, who've actually read the old pre-Socratics and stuff, they're going to start about 300 years after this, okay? Solomon, it's not that philosophy didn't exist before then. It's just that logical writing about philosophy wasn't prominent. Got to remember, most people were writing in either pictograph or monosyllabic script. So written language hadn't developed to such a degree yet that people were writing with as much depth about philosophy. But if you know that philosophy, you know that Solomon is talking philosophical. That which is far off and deep, very deep, who can find out? He is talking about ultimate reality. He is talking about multiplying all these different religious philosophies and coming up with the sum of them to figure out what the ultimate truth is. And he said, I have not found. My mind has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. Because he's saying all men are wicked. He said one man, he's saying, I turn my mind to know and seek out wisdom in the sum of things, and to know that wickedness is folly and that foolishness is madness. I found more bitter than death a woman who is a trap, whose heart is a snares, whose hands are fetters. One who pleases God escapes her, but a sinner is taken by her. See, this is what I found, says the teacher. Adding one thing to another finds the sum, which my mind sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. So he says, one man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. See, this I alone I have found, that God made human beings straightforward, but they have devised many schemes. So what is he saying here? Obviously, he's got 1,000 wives, right? So a woman among all these I have not found, but one man among 1,000 I have found, okay? So what he's saying is, I've only ever known one righteous man, and I don't think he's talking about himself. He's probably talking about David. That would be my guess. But the bigger implication is really Christ. Okay? If this is prophetic, he's saying Christ is the only righteous man. There is no righteous woman. So don't think of this as him saying men good, women bad. He's saying I've only ever found one righteous man, and I've never found a righteous woman. That's what he's saying. He says, see, this alone I have found, that God has made human beings straightforward, but they have devised many schemes. In other words, God didn't make us wicked, Calvinists. He made us straightforward. Notice Solomon is saying this after the fall. He's saying God made human beings straightforward, but they have devised many schemes. Because if you go all the way back to Adam and Eve, they're coming up with reasons to do what God says not to do. That's what devise many schemes means. That's what men do. I've known so many Christians who devise schemes. And we all do it in our hearts. When we want to do something, God says, no, stay away from that woman, stay away from that woman, stay away from that woman. But didn't Samson love a woman who was wicked or something, and then God used it for the greater good? We come up with reasons to do what we want to do when God says no. And the fact that we're coming up with the reasons says God is telling us no, and our heart is convicting us that we shouldn't, and we're coming up with reasons to do it anyways. And so he's saying, because man is like this, I've only ever found one good man, which again, he's probably referencing David. And David made a very big mistake, but he's looking at as a man who's upright and not trying to do evil all the time. David made one big, huge mistake with Uriah the Hittite's wife, and another one by numbering the people, but for the most part, he was after God's heart. Who is like the wise man, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? Wisdom makes one face shine, and the hardness of one's countenance is changed. Keep the king's command because of your sacred oath. Do not be terrified. Go from his presence. Do not delay when the matter is unpleasant, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is powerful, and who can say to him, what are you doing? Whoever obeys a command will meet no harm, and the wise man will know the time and way. So he's basically talking about just how to conduct yourself before authority. Okay? For every matter has its time, and although the troubles of mortals lie heavy on them, indeed, they do not know what is to be, for who can tell them how it will be? No one has power over the wind to restrain the wind, or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from the battle, nor does wickedness deliver those who practice it. In other words, by being wicked, you're not going to gain more control. You're not going to ultimately change the course of history or gain power over death. All this I observed, applying my mind to all that is done under the sun. So this is a big one today, okay? No one has power over the strayed of the wind or power over the day of death. No one. So think about the world we live in right now where people are saying we're going to figure out how to have eternal life. That's evil. All this I observe, applying to my mind to all that is done under the sun, while one person exercises authority over another to another's hurt. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This is also vanity. Because sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the human heart is fully set to do evil. See, there are people that I know personally that routinely cheat on their taxes. They lie on loan applications to multiply houses. They borrow the down payment, which is totally illegal. It's corrupt. You're not supposed to do that. This is literally how housing markets crash, because everyone starts doing this, and when everyone's borrowing the down payment, which exists for you to prove that you can save money before someone loans you $300,000-$400,000 for an object, it's good to prove that you can save up 25, 30 grand before they go into hock for you for that. And when a bunch of people don't do that because they're like, oh, I'll pay my bills, so I'll just borrow the down payment from somebody, and then once I get it, I'm not going to put, because once you have the down payment, you don't ultimately always have to put it down on the mortgage, or you can refi and then you can get it back. Well, everyone starts doing this, and then eventually it catches up, and then the housing market crashes. This happened in '08. By 2015, people just started doing it again. It's illegal, it's corrupt, but everyone's doing it, and so many people are lying that it's going to be a while before they get caught. People who went bankrupt in the last one went and did it again. I was one of the ones who went bankrupt and was minding my P's and Q's and doing all my stuff right. But when the system collapses, there's a bunch of collateral damage, and a lot of people who are working hard and paying their bills and playing by the rules end up going belly up. And then those rich people, they go move their assets around and hide among their relatives' wealth, and then they go do it all again. I know several people who roll like this, okay? And because the sentence against the evil deed is not executed speedily, they think, I'm getting away with it. I know people who were little kids in the '08 crash, so they don't know how bad it is. And now they've been living like this nonstop. And they literally think this crazy economic growth where the stock market has grown from like 10,000, 12,000 points to 8,000 points in '08 to now it's up to like 45,000 points. So the stock market in the past 15 years has gone up 5 times. It's insane. 5.5 times. It's insane. They think this is normal. It'll always be like this. No, no, no. What you're watching is the beginning of the end. And in the beginning of the end, it seems like money's multiplying because if you're willing to grab the right assets by illicit means and the currency is inflating, well, you can get yourself a bunch of real estate and think, I'm going to weather the storm. And I promise you, when the reckoning comes, and it is coming, it's called the Black Horse of the Apocalypse, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go after the Christians who cut corners and multiplied wealth for themselves. That's going to be your first scapegoat. Though sinners do evil 100 times and prolong their lives, yet I know that it will not be well. That it will be well with those who fear God, because they stand in fear before Him. These people do what they do because they don't fear God, and they're going to bring persecution on all of us. And if they don't get theirs in this life, they'll get theirs in hell, because God is not just going to let that slide. Oh, these people are called by my name, but they go around, dodging all the taxes and cheating in the system and multiplying wealth for themselves, and then they brought persecution on their brothers and sisters because of it? No. If you think God's going to allow that to go unpunished, if you're not getting punished for it in this life and repenting, you're going to hell. You were never really saved. That's how you're going to find out. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will they prolong their days. Will they prolong their days like a shadow, because they do not stand in fear before God. There is a vanity that takes place on the earth, and there are righteous people who are treated according to the conduct of the wicked, and there are wicked people who are treated according to the conduct of the righteous. That also, I say, is vanity. Remember, these guys are going to bring persecution on the believers who mind their P's and Q's. People who didn't cheat the system, paid all their taxes, get caught up in the economic calamity that comes from it. This is vanity. So I commend enjoyment. This is what I recommend you do. Just enjoy yourself. For there's nothing better for people to do than to eat and drink and enjoy themselves. For this will go with them in their toil all the days of their life that God gives them under the sun. Just try to be content. Try to be patient. Live this out. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to see the wisdom that is done on the earth, how one's eyes see sleep neither day nor night, then I saw all the work of God, that no one can find out what is happening under the sun. However much they may toil in seeking, they will not find out. And even though that those who are wise claim to know, they cannot find out. So anyone who tries to act like they understand the whole big picture, they don't. Okay? We know more now because we have the New Testament in the book of Revelation, but they do not. Okay? We know more. We do not know all. All this I laid to heart, examining it, how all the righteous and the wise in their deeds are in the hand of God, whether it is love or hate one does not know. Everything that confronts them is vanity, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and to the evil, to the clean and unclean, to those who sacrifice, to those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners. Those who swear are like those who shun an oath. This is an evil that happens under the sun, that the same fate comes to everyone. Moreover, the hearts of all are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go and are dead. He's not saying there's no point to everything. He's not saying God is not doing anything about it. It's no better to be righteous than to be wicked. What he is saying is they all have the same fate, because everyone is ultimately wicked. The hearts of all are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go on to the dead. So he said the hearts of the Son of Man is full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. People are evil and then they die. There's some that are more righteous than others, but they all ultimately have the same fate. But whoever is joined with all the living has hope, and a living dog is better than a dead lion. The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward, and even the memory of them is lost. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished. Never again will they have any share in all that happens under the sun. Go eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has long ago approved what you do. In other words, God's sovereign over history. History. He does not control our will. He gives us a free will. They say, well, God turns the heart of the king. Yeah, God turns the heart of the king, but that's talking about God's sovereignty over governmental jurisdiction. Okay? In other words, God can make a king be kind to the people or wicked to the people. Why? Well, maybe God's punishing the people. That's not talking about God like usurping people's free will on a regular basis. It's talking about God being granting for that a person has favor towards you. Okay. So he says, "Let your garments always be white, and do not let oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that are given you under the sun, because there's a portion in life in your toil which you have done in the sun." Now, notice he said, "Enjoy life with the wife whom you love." Remember how the Song of Solomon is basically about the wife that he loves. The rest of these wives, he doesn't love them. These are political marriages and lust, basically. And then he has one that he loves, okay? I do believe we're meant to have one wife. I do believe God has never called polygamy a sin, but we are meant to have one wife and be content with that one, like God in the Spirit. That's our model, okay? So, I think Solomon's realized this after his 1,000 wives. This sucks. I have not met one good woman. So maybe Song of Solomon is after this, or maybe it's just a poetic metaphor that's all prophetic. Whatever your hands find to do, do with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Again, I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor the bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. Time and chance. So the word for chance doesn't have to necessarily mean randomness. It can just mean circumstance. Let's see if I can find it. It says impact, casual, chance, occurrent. Okay? So it can be like circumstance. But circumstance is a word. Circum means like go around. What goes around comes around. Circumstance. Okay? And you want to think about it in this way. The universe spins. Okay? We see the Earth in the center. The universe is spinning around it. Okay? And in these rotations, we see everything is ordered up. And the laws of motion are in place. The physical laws are in place. And so in this circuit of things going around, there's cause and effect. And this cause and effect is just happening. And yes, God intervenes and has even ordered up things that happen at a certain time. But the point is most of it is just happening because God just wound up the physical aspects of the universe and it happens like that. So that's where circumstance is kind of related to the idea of chance. Okay? Stance is like standing, circular standing. This is just how things are. Okay? In the circuit of things, what goes around. Okay? And so the idea is that in time, things just happen. And he's looking at all of this and saying, who gets what gifts is based on things that just happen that are not in your control. That's what it means. That's what he means, okay? He's not saying things are random and there's no purpose and plan to these things and God's not controlling these things. He is saying that things just happen outside of your control. In other words, you were not... he says that the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, neither the bread to the wise. Okay? Nor favor to the man of skill. You are not ultimately the author of your own success. God is. Okay, and God is over these circumstances, and these circumstances are outside of your control, basically. So whether you win the race or do all this stuff, even if you win the race, you might have practiced really hard, but God determined that you had the genetic ability to even compete in the Olympics. Okay, you might win the battle, but God determined that you had enough people in your armies to even show up to the battle. Okay, so there's so many things that are outside of your control, and that's what he's getting at here. For man knows not his time, as the fishes are not taken in an evil net, and as the birds are not caught in the snare, so are the sons of man snared in an evil time, and it falls suddenly on them. This wisdom have I seen also under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city, a few men within it, and there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city, yet no one remembered the same poor man. Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of the wise are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that rules among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. So he probably has read the histories of many kingdoms and wars and stuff like that that's gone on around him. And he's saying, yeah, wow, this guy saved the city by his wisdom, but nobody remembers who he is now. And it's better to be wise than to be a fool, but even the wise are going to be forgotten in the end. Okay? So generally speaking, it's better to be wise than be a fool, but don't seek wisdom to such a degree that you think you're going to achieve immortality or legacy because of it. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. That's awesome. Let's see that. Dead flies makes a perfumer's ointment and give off a foul odor, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. In other words, you can be, here's the thing. I could be a wise man my whole life, but then I lose all my money in an investment, or I cheat on my wife, or whatever. The ones like David's life, right? David is doing awesome his whole life, but then the thing with Bathsheba makes him look really bad for a long time. Okay, and I guarantee people were talking about that. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of a fool to the left. So in case you're wondering which way to vote, you guys, the heart of the wise inclines to the right, and the heart of the fool to the left. It's always been like this. Okay, there's a reason why they call it left and right. Now, these candidates suck. Don't get me wrong. But the left is always more crazy. Always more godless. Just is. Even when fools walk on the road, they lack sense and show to everyone that they are fools. If the anger of a ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for calmness will undo great offenses. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and this is great error as if it proceeded from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horseback and princes walking on foot like slaves. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks a wall will be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones will be hurt by them. Whoever splits logs will be endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and the one that does not wet the edge, then more strength must be exerted, but wisdom helps one to succeed. What is this talking about? Well, a lot of this stuff is talking about political rebellion. Slaves on horseback and princes walking on foot like slaves. There's a revolution that's gone on, okay? But he's saying whoever digs a pit will fall into it. They're going to get their comeuppance in time. Whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a snake, okay? These people who got their power in unjust ways are going to get their comeuppance. He says, whoever quarries a stone will be split by them. Whoever splits logs will be endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and one does not wet the edge, then more strength must be exerted, but wisdom helps one to succeed. So he's comparing sharpening your axe or your pickaxe with applying wisdom. Okay, so this is a proverbial statement that he's saying here. So I've worked in a food kitchen, and I can tell you, and anybody who's a chef can tell you, a dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife. The sharper your knife is, yes, it will cut you easier, but you will exert less force in the thing that you're cutting, and so therefore you'll be less likely to slip and cut yourself. Okay? Every chef will tell you the sharper the knife, the safer it is. Okay? That's basically what he's saying here. The sharper the knife, the safer it is. Okay? So how is he comparing this to the political? When in the political situation, when you have fewer rulers, that's like having a sharper knife. Think about the pyramid structure of rule, okay? The fewer the rulers, the sharper the blade. The more the rulers, the duller the blade, okay? So the fewer the rulers, the less opportunity there is for corruption. So if I have a king who divvies out land to his nobles, and some of those nobles are corrupt, well, eventually word's going to come to the king, and if that corrupt noble is accumulating too much power for himself or hurting the people, he's making his kingdom weak against potential invasion from outsiders, so he's going to deal with that corrupt noble, okay? But if I have a democracy and I have 300,000 people who are just there to get their monies, it's never going to get better, okay? So that's how he is comparing the political to the blunt iron, okay? But wisdom helps one to succeed. If a snake bites before it is charmed, it has no advantage to the charmer. Words spoken by the wise bring them favor, but the lips of fools consume them. I think that's an Old Testament way of saying don't throw your pearls before swine. The words of their mouth begin in foolishness, and their talk ends in wicked madness. Yet fools talk on and on. No one knows what is to happen, and who can tell anyone what the future holds? The toil of fools wears them out, for they do not even know the way to town. Alas for you, O land, when your king is a servant and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is a nobleman and your princes feast at the proper time. See what he's saying? When your king is a servant, that means you've had a revolution. And somebody who's not a noble is now ruling. When your king is a nobleman, well, he's saying when you get new money in charge, when a king is a nobleman, these guys tend to live nobly. That's how they became kings, because they had prudence about them. When your king is a servant, he's like, look, now I'm rich. Now I can feast in the morning. Okay? These guys, these nobles tend to have come from generations of people who have ruled, and they understand that if you rule well, your kingdom is going to fare better against outside invaders and stuff like that. Servants don't know anything because they've never been up at the top. And so they just want to enjoy all the rich stuff that the powerful have. He's saying, this is what happens when you have a communist revolution. What happens? A bunch of new money shows up, and now they've got all the money, and they just want to just get drunk and be stupid all the time while the rest of us get screwed. Go watch Animal Farm. Okay, Animal Farm is a perfect indictment of communism. Well, communism is basically just a revolution on top of a revolution, because the capitalist revolution is a revolution too. And the French Revolution basically produced communism, and the capitalist revolution has basically produced the MAGA movement. They're both bad. Now we have two versions of bad, and which one's better? Well, we need kings. We need kings who have absolute rule, based on the nobility of people who have ruled for a long time. And sometimes a king gets overthrown, but it's never totally getting rid of the nobility altogether. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Feasts are made for laughter, wine gladdens life, and money meets every need. Do not curse a king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, and some winged creature will tell the matter. Okay, this is what I think. I think Satan likes revolution, and God does not. And so when he hears you cursing the rich, oh, the 1%, the 1%, oh, right? He's going, okay, we can start a political revolution here, and Satan starts moving to turn to overthrow. And revolution always turns into bad for everybody. Then he says this, send out your bread in the waters, for in many days you will have it back. What does this mean? It means be generous. Okay, now this is probably a super old proverb when people were settling up and down river systems. And what they were saying is, don't hoard all your grain, throw some of it downriver. Why? Because eventually we're going to have to migrate and settle downriver. And wouldn't it be great if there's a bunch of wild grain growing there when we get there instead of having to start over from scratch? Ah, yeah, dude, yeah. Divide your means 7 ways or even 8, for you do not know what disaster may happen on the earth. In other words, diversify your investments. When the clouds are full, they empty rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls in the south or north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. In other words, we don't know which way the wind is blowing. So we diversify our investments, and we are generous. Whoever observes the wind will not sow, and whoever regards the clouds will not reap. In other words, he's saying, here's practical wisdom. Diversify your investments and keep on working. Don't try to predict everything and then try to strike it rich by getting that right stock that blew up at the right time. Okay? Yes, some people win that way, but the majority lose that way. So don't try to do that. Diversify your investments and just keep working. Just as you do not know how the breath comes to the bones of the mother's womb, you do not know how the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not let your hands be idle, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. Even those who live many years should rejoice in them all, yet let them remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart be cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remember, there's a time and place for everything, but God seeks what is in past. In other words, do what you're passionate about. Go after what you want. Just don't sin. Okay? Banish anxiety from your mind and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. So in other words, take care of your health and take care of your mental health. Banish anxiety from you. Well, how do I do that? By trusting in God and following his ways and being patient and trusting him. He's telling you it's better to have a healthy mind and a healthy body than anything, because you're stuck with these things for the rest of your life. So just try to have that. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. You're eventually going to get old, and it's just going to be hard. You just got to do a bunch of exercises just to not be in pain. I'm in my 40s, and I'm already starting to feel that. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return with the rain, in the day when the guards of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the women who grind cease working because they are few, and those who look through the windows see dimly, when the doors in the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of the song are brought low. When one is afraid of the heights, and terrors are in the road, and almond trees blossom, and grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because all must go to their eternal home, and the mourners will go about in the streets, before the silver cord is snapped, and the golden bowl is broken, and the pitcher is broken at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to earth as it was, and the breath returns to God who gave it. So what is he saying? He's saying, learn to live in fear of the Lord when you're young, not through all the hard knocks, because you've done every wrong thing until it broke you. Okay? Because it all is going to end with your breath returning to God, your spirit returning to God. And what's going to happen with it? Well, we'll find out. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, all is vanity. In other words, life is hard. Fear God. Pursue what God has designed you for. Find pleasure in what you're doing, but fear God and how you do it. Besides being wise, the teacher also taught people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging of many proverbs. So we know this is after the Proverbs. The teacher sought to find pleasing words and wrote words of truth plainly. So this is telling you to go read the Proverbs. The sayings of the wise are like goads, like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings that are given by one shepherd. Now the one shepherd is ultimately Christ, but Solomon is the one shepherd in mind because he wrote the Proverbs. Of anything beyond these, my child, beware. Of making many books there is no end, and of much study is a weariness to the flesh. Remember, this is coming from a man who has probably studied all the world's religions and philosophies of his day. All the wisdom of all the kings that he can find. because they're coming to him from all over the place. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. I think it just says the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. That's it. It's not that complicated, but what the prevailing theme is for the whole book is that we're all going to die. You're not going to see the whole big picture of what God is doing to the end. So be patient, endure it. Be satisfied with your wife if you have one. Be satisfied with your life. Be satisfied with your work. Be satisfied with your food. Be content. Trust God. Put anxiety far from you. Okay? I've watched America go through poor times where most people are poor and rich times where most people are rich, and financial turnover where many people went belly up. I've seen these things now in my relatively short life. And I can tell you, there's nothing that makes sense but to be useful to God, caring about the things that matter to God, and then just living life peacefully in contentment. People who chase after money and pile it up, especially if they do so by illicit means, are going to suffer in the end. If you happen to be graced with the opportunity to make money, just be generous with what you do with it. Enjoy it, but don't hoard it. Don't be stingy. Don't be dishonest in how you make it. Don't cheat on your taxes. And when it comes to things having to do with government, the more you stay out of it, the better you are. The more you stay out of pushing your opinion in politics, the better you are. The happiest people that I know, I'm not saying they don't vote. Okay, I'm not going to vote. I think these candidates are both god-awful. I'm not going to vote. I think America's doomed. But the people that I know are happy and who love the Lord and tend to avoid political things. They tend to stay out of it. They've got, whatever the system is, you've got to make money and you've got to take care of your wife and your kids. That's it. And your health. That's it. That's all it ever is. Whether you're the president or the pauper, you just got to take care of your health. And then your wife and kids if you have them. And that's about it. And then you're going to die either way. So the important thing is fear God and keep his commandments, for that's your whole duty. That's it. Just fear God and keep his commandments. He's going to bring every deed into judgment, every secret deed. So the goal of your life should be just to live life and then fear God and keep his commandments. It seems simple, but it's very hard because this world is full of noise telling you that other things are more important. So that's it. Now, is this Solomon's repentance? Well, it's certainly after he has a bunch of women, and certainly probably after he's gone after strange gods, I would assume. Is it at the very end of his life? It's after he's written the Proverbs. Maybe, I would assume. In his Song of Solomon, that one woman that he's never found? Maybe. Maybe it is. I don't know. I can't really say that he's showing I've sinned and then I've repented. He's certainly acknowledging that he's sinned and he's done a bunch of folly. So I'm placing it here because it seems to make sense that way. He seems to be an older man. But remember, an older man from him, he's going to die by like 60. Maybe even younger. By the looks of things, he is very young when he takes the throne. Remember, he's the youngest son of Bathsheba. And David has Bathsheba, I think in his 50s. In his early 50s, probably, he has Bathsheba. And he's dead by, I think, 75, maybe? 70 or 75? I think 70, which would put Solomon, her youngest son, probably as a teenager when he's born and probably in his 50s when he dies. He's pretty young. He's done a lot of stupid. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if this is repentance at his end of life. It probably is, though, because if he's written the Proverbs already, I would assume that he wrote his Proverbs. Those were his good days. And, it's like the first, let's say, decade or so of his administration is good. Probably gets bad after that. And then the last decade, he's probably wising up and writing this. That would be my guess. So that's why I put this one third. So when we're done with this, we're going to continue on and we're going to look at the whole kingdom of Ahab and Jezebel and Elijah and Elisha and their involvement. And I'm going to try to probably take you to the point where we start introducing the prophets. And then when I get back from India, we're probably going to start on the period where the prophets are and then coincide that with the New Testament, because I've got my Apostles' Teaching book almost done. I'm hoping to have a hard copy printed by the time I leave to India. If you see that online, because sometimes I'm going to put it to print so I can buy a copy of it, I'll try not to do that because I want to get a copy of it so I can just hang on to it rather than one that says author copy. But I won't release this until probably January. So if you see it live on there, don't try to buy it. But it's almost done. And this is my New Testament translation, which also has the books in chronological order with all the history around them. So everything that I've been studying about the Essenes, about the Maccabees, about the church history, everything is going into this to kind of surround it. So you get what I believe is a more accurate socio-political and historical context for it. And then the books are put in their historical order, in the order that they're written, with the events in between the books that kind of tell you. So like I'll finish off a book and I'll say, so here's the Acts. And this is the epilogue and introduction to Acts of the Apostles. So this is talking about the writing of Luke and then the writing of Acts, which is going to be the framework for all the letters. And so I'm going to have Matthew, then Luke and Acts. And then as Acts is going to give you when all the different letters were written up until the ones that were after the book of Acts. I put in there, see right here, Luke's gospel written. I note when they're written so you can, if you want to, go and read them at that point. 1 Corinthians sent. And then I start with the letters in order with James so you can see, because it's like Luke and Acts is basically your primary historical narrative. James on through the rest is going to be your theological construction of the new covenant in the church. And it's going to kind of crystallize with, after that's all done, it's going to be Peter's version of Mark, and then or Peter's gospel, which is Mark, and then John the Apostle's writings at the end. And so it's going to walk you through everything that happened in 70 AD with the Zealots and the Essenes and the Jews and then Jerusalem getting destroyed. And then it's going to get into John's writings, which happen in probably the 80s AD, and then Revelation happens in the 90s AD. So I kind of give the rationale for why I put these books in a different place. Most of this is going to be in agreement with your academic consensus. Several things are not, though. And I try to justify that, and I believe I'm right. I think your academic consensus is largely based around speculative information about Paul's later missionary journeys and all this stuff, and 20th or 19th century speculations about John's writings being written earlier so that they can try to make Revelation about 70 AD. I think that's garbage scholarship that is based on denominational biases, and so I'm weeding all that out. And then in the end of the book, I'm going to have it's just about 10 pages from 319, maybe it's 20 pages. It's about 10 pages. I think 11 pages I have. It's just a summary, and it's called The Elementary Principles of the Faith. And this is my summary of these are the things that I believe we should divide over and everything else we shouldn't. Okay? And so this is based on Hebrews 6, where Paul describes the elementary principles of faith. And this is me kind of broadening that out to say this is what the New Testament Paul was talking about with those 6 major doctrines, which are, that's why I have it broken up. I said, the law of Moses and its fulfillment, that's kind of a starting point because that is the starting point of that. And then salvation through faith, baptism of the Spirit and the gifts, the offices of the church and their administration, the resurrection of the dead and the day of the Lord, and eternal judgment. So this is kind of summarizing Paul's six cardinal principles. Repent. You're going to find this in Hebrews 6. And then just a very short summary on the great apostasy and the mystery of lawlessness, what we're heading towards. And what this is meant to be is a tool for teachers. If you aspire to lead a home Bible study group, or you are a pastor or aspire to be a pastor, this is meant for you. If you teach or if you study the New Testament, but you're a little confused because the books aren't in order and you want it to be clearer, this is for you. It is so you can receive the New Testament in the order that it was written, as if you were a first century Christian being informed by the apostles as they're writing their writings. Okay? This is meant to help you to better understand how these things were built upon one another and the history surrounding this, because all these writings are going to take place in a period of about 70 years ish, maybe 60 years about that these writings are going to be done. And by the time you're done, it also, the other thing it does is when I cite something, like here I cite Isaiah, I only cite the things that were written beforehand, where most of your Bibles with cross-references and footnotes are going to cite things forward and backwards, and that's confusing because you wouldn't, for instance, I'm not going to cite something from Ephesians to explain Romans if Ephesians hasn't been written yet. Okay? I might cite something from Romans to explain Ephesians, but I'm not going to cite Ephesians to explain Romans, because if I was living in that time, I wouldn't be able to go look at Ephesians to know what Paul's talking about. So in that way, I believe it's a lot clearer, and that's going to be my goal. Like I said, my goal is to have this. I'm going through my final pass. If you see these little like yellow highlights here, that's actually done. If you see like these little yellow highlights, these are like the last few words that I want to double check and make sure I got the Greek right. But this is basically my final pass to just make sure it reads well and make sure when I justify it like this, it fits. Because sometimes you'll put something like this and it's going to change how many lines it is, and then it ends up messed up when I put it on Amazon. So that's one of the reasons that I pulled it down, among just needing to really grow in how much I understood Greek. So that tool is going to be done soon. And like I said, I'm going to be going to India in 2 weeks now. So if you wouldn't mind praying for me that I get healthier before then, because I'm downing the chicken broth for a reason here. And other than that, I hope you guys are blessed by this. I will be, again, probably just teaching through Kings. I don't know if I'm going to do an eschatology update. Maybe I'll do some kind of update about craziness that's going on after the election, because I'll be here for 2 weeks after that. But other than that, I would just say, if your conscience tells you to vote, vote. If your conscience tells you don't. That's going to be, I'm not going to say vote your conscience, because I don't believe that we are under a moral obligation to vote. And it's kind of a mess now. But what I perceive coming is a general consensus of repudiating people who didn't vote. And that's going to be a lot of Christians. And I see that probably turning towards general persecution as it keeps getting worse. So, hope you guys are blessed by this. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.